Look at that, we're live. That's how fast
Hello,
we are.
everyone,
Because we have
and
no
welcome
intros.
to our Kraken Week episode of Roll for Combat Live.
Release the Kraken.
You know, it's like all the Kraken videos, and no one did that except us. I was like,
There you
I
go.
thought there'd be 100 released to Kraken videos, not a single person.
Well, Linda was thinking about doing it for ours, but she decided to say something else about. I think she tried to do Let's Get Kraken, which is also another one that a lot of people are going to do. And we leave the 80s movie for you.
Thank you.
But yes, I am
1980, yeah, 1980.
Yeah.
It's 81, actually. I think it's 81.
I'm getting over being sick, so if my voice sounds a little bit nasally today, I apologize. But
I am sick.
yes, but I'm here. I work today and everything, so
Look at that.
yeah, have some fun
We had a
times.
full 2 weeks without seeing Derik.
Well, that's no. You saw me literally 10 days ago. We were
Okay.
at
A week
Origins.
and a half without seeing Derik.
Yeah.
That's right.
Origins was a lot of fun. I know, we were just talking about that a little bit, and I know we're waiting for people to get in here. But yeah, the last time I hung out with you, Stephen, was at Origins, and I had a pretty good time. I had a lot of fun.
It wasn't as last year seemed to be a lot more chaos.
Yeah.
It was a lot more organized this week. This year.
Yeah.
So it wasn't quite as chaotic.
Yeah, what we ended up doing is for the Patreon, we ended up actually having our own private event list, and our patrons would create events, and they were available to other people or people associated with the Patreon. And so obviously other people were signing up for official events, but we kind of try to organize our stuff. So we ended up getting a lot of stuff in. Actually, I played a lot of games with Steven. We played a Quiet Year. We played Shadow Dark. We played a Magic the Gathering draft, which we won. Thank you, Steven. Steven had a very nice little little red-white aggro beatdown deck. It was very good. Yeah, it was everything that I want basically out of a convention. So, and then ironically, when I got home, I had to sign a day later. I had to sign for my Gen Con badge, which came because as I said on my video, I forgot to cancel it, so I didn't get a refund.
You're going to Gen Con.
No, I don't have it. I almost certainly am not.
So actually, it's funny. After the Magic draft, because I won, I was 2-0 the first two games, and then lost the third game. But I went to the hotel and I forgot I had a whole sideboard. And I think if I put in the sideboard, I would have beat him. Because I couldn't finish him off. I got him down to 1 hit point both times.
You had that reach the damage spell.
Yeah, and I had big boppers and things that because his deck was blue slow, so I could have finished him off. I was like, oh crap, I totally forgot. I forgot I had all those because it was it was a white weenie aggro deck, and then I was like, ooh, but I had all the big slower creatures that could have just smashed through at the end. I was like, oh, I should have. Oh well.
But yeah, so it was fun. Got to play some board games, got to play Magic, got to play some RPGs, and yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, I got to hang out. We had some nice meals, and we had a little Patreon get together and all that other stuff. So
yeah, it was a lot of fun. You got to see me. I want props for old school D&D adventuring.
all right, I can officially confirm. Steven brought the old school skills. So we were running, I ran module T1, Village of Hamlet, which includes the Ruined Moat House and Dungeons. And I actually ran it 2 sessions to try to complete the adventure in the con. And the first session, Steven was there. He had a fighter. We were playing the Shadow Dark, using Shadow Dark. So using Shadow Dark
Blitz!
Yeah, Shadow Dark Extreme.
Extreme! Big X, extreme.
I had a lot of house rules I kind of made up completely randomly on the spot. Anyways, but there was several critical points, but the one that really stands out is the group had slain this giant serpent, and everybody was kind of like, yay, but they're like, okay, but where's the treasure? And they're looking around, and everyone's like, oh, well, that's disappointing. And then Steven goes, I got the snake, and I was like, oh, golden jewels pour out of it, because of course it's a module from the 1980s. Of course the monsters eat all the treasure, and sure enough, the monster, the giant snake in the module, had a bunch of golden gems in its belly.
You were so happy when I did that.
I was, because I was like, this is a quintessential. It is a quintessential moment of between the sort of styles of play and just the player mentality of, to do it, and testing the player skill rather than the PC skill, and make a perception check or make a wisdom check or whatever. And if you fail, you find it. If you don't, you do. But this is not something that you could make a check for, because that's not really the way Shadow Dark works, or certainly old school D&D, because there weren't skills. Anyways, it was very satisfying for me.
You know what was funny though? The funniest part was I played my game this week and I told my players about that, and these guys have been playing since the 70s. Not only were they not impressed, they're like, it's like, well, did you like take the furniture and like put it into your like bags of holding? Like they were like, you didn't go far enough.
Greyhawk in the room.
Right. They were like, that's exactly what they said. It's like, you Greyhawk the dungeon, man. It's like, if it ain't nailed down, it's treasure. They're like, everything gets taken. Everything. I was like, yeah, they're so old school. Oh my God. They're level 17 now, Mark. They were so excited that our 3-hour session was nothing but shopping.
I guess they like their shopping channel.
Well, you know what? They managed to finally, because they had something like 20,000 gold pieces each.
It's a lot of money.
Well, they went through 2 dungeons in a row that had, they were like trapped in another dimension, so they had all this treasure they couldn't spend. They went through and finally leveled up. One of my guys bought, he has damage resistance 10 everything now. He bought like 2 rings, a cloak, boots, whatever he could find, he bought. And I was like, wow, you're really going for it. He's like, yep. I was like, okay. It's a monk too. So I was like, this is going to get interesting. Because level 17, man, there's a lot of monsters at level 17 where if you get hit and critted and fail fort save, you die. There's a lot of that. I was like, damn. There's a lot of instant death once you get up to these levels, so I guess they really don't want to get hit, but fascinating.
Just completely randomly, I have my Discord over here, and I have my chat with my fellow Knights of Last Calls, including Mr. Aaron Smith, who Stephen had. You got to meet Smith's wife at Origins, and you guys got to hang out. We're talking about something completely unrelated, related to our Knights of Last Call, and he says, unrelated. Though my brain has been thinking a lot about a Monster Hunter plus Pokemon hex crawl game with all of RFC's shit, because I'm a nerd and I like Monster Hunter. And all right, I'll say it, Eldamon is fucking dope. So because you gave him the book.
So the book is just so you know, Mark, only 2 people on planet Earth have the Eldamon book right now besides myself.
I am not one of those.
You're not one of
people.
them. It is Smith from Knights of Last Call has the Pathfinder version, and a very certain person at Larian Studios has the 5e version. I'll leave it at that. So.
There you go.
But yeah, actually,
it's not you, and it's not me.
Well, I have 5 more versions. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Our publisher, Diamond, has versions too. Actually.
Oh, you're our distributor. You're our publisher.
Sorry, I'm the publisher, distributor, Diamond.
Yeah. But yeah, no, he and of course, remember, Smith has kids. Smith loves like Final Fantasy, and he's got like, he's much more into like that kind of, he has like little plushy, mimic and owl bears and stuff like that, that his kids get him, and he likes them, stuff like that. So he's much more into that, and he loves Nintendo, Breath of the Wild, all that stuff. Pokemon. So he got his hands on the book because Stephen had brought like a preview copy, and yeah, he loves it. He loves the mechanics. He loves the idea of it. He thinks it's great. So,
well, the funny part
is
is
the printer proof, which was sent over to make sure that the book worked.
Right.
I'll send it to you. Don't worry.
Yeah, there might be some errors, but that's all right. But,
there's a few, but you know what? It's a very complex thing, and the errors are minor. But whatever, can only do so much. PDFs have updates, but it'll be hard to even find them. The funny thing is, Smith backed the new upcoming Battlezoo Bestiary Elemental Storm, where you get a Kraken Locket. Look at that.
Well, that is a good segue into Kraken Week.
I will. Let me finish. And there's a thing where you get an email asking you to write back to me and saying what you look forward to the most, which people have been doing. It's really nice. So after you're back, there's some follow-up emails. And he wrote back and said, the plushies, of course. But I was like, I don't even think we're doing plushies, but whatever. So anyhow, Also, one more thing. For Kraken Week, I decided, what the hell? I'm doing this. If you go to battlezoo.com and use checkout code Kraken, you get 25% off a whole bunch of things. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah.
So it's a Kraken Week special.
A Kraken Week special.
So we should explain what Kraken Week is, because all
You
Kraken
do
Week
that
videos are
'cause
supposed
we've
to
been
do
talking.
that.
You
And
do
we
that.
kind of waited a while and didn't. So Kraken Week, if you're like, what is this? What is Kraken Week? It's like Discovery Channel Shark Week, except for instead of about sharks, it's about not just Krakens, but any kind of tabletop RPG, fantasy, aquatic, underwater, maritime kind of content. And so the idea is a whole bunch of YouTube creators are all making content on that topic. And there's a playlist about Kraken Week, and there's also just generally that means people will be watching about that content, and it'll be just sort of a special event where different channels, the big channels, medium channels like us, or small channels like Arcane Mark, will come together and all do content. So that's Kraken Week. And for this week, for our live show, we decided to talk about the D&D and Pathfinder adventures through the ages that are pirate, maritime, like island or underwater themed. Generally going to be talking about ones that were made by like TSR/wotc or Paizo, but we might stick in Jewel of the Indigo Isles in there as an example, because that was made
Of course we
by
would.
us.
That's the only one I can really talk about.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about some old-fashioned adventures. You probably want to start with the original OG. Was it Isle of Dread?
Isle of Dread X1.
X1. And because Isle of Dread's a fascinating one, because it is based mostly on King Kong more than
Right.
actual Kraken slash, way before Jurassic Park was such a thing, way before, dinosaurs and pirate adventures and all these things, became part of our culture because of Pirates of the Caribbean and Jurassic Park. Really, the big daddy of them all was King Kong and Skull Island and having dinosaurs on the island.
Mhm.
And that's, from what I understand, what they were trying to emulate.
Yeah. King Kong
Absolutely.
is actually entering public domain in sometime in the next like 5-10 years or something.
Yeah, yeah. I saw it. Yeah. Now I'm going to go off topic. The list of like the things coming in public domain in the next 10 years is stunning. It's
Yeah, yeah.
things like
I
Superman,
saw like a-
Wonder Woman,
Right,
Popeye,
Batman. Yeah.
Disney, all the Disney characters, Donald Duck, Pluto. I was like, oh man, this is going to get crazy. Anyhow.
But yeah, so yeah, X1, Isle of Dread, and for those of you who don't know, which not everybody does,
Pull up your copy. I'm sure you have one.
well, specifically, I just want to talk about what that X means. So when D&D adventure modules used to get released, they would have a letter and a number, and the letter denoted it was part of a series of adventures. These weren't necessarily like an adventure path, although often it would be like a 3-part series, and you might have G1, G2, G3. But there was a series of adventures made for basic D&D, which started with B, as in basic, and very famously B2 is Keep on the Borderlands, which many people know of, or B1, In Search of the Unknown. So X stands for expert. So when people talk about BX D&D, in the context of like OSE, OSR stuff, Labyrinth Lord and whatnot, the X, BX, is the same X as an Isle of Dread. So this was like the idea that, okay, your characters have leveled up. You're now expert level characters. You're level 3 and 4, and now you get to go explore. You get to go sail across the ocean, not just shoot down the road to the nearest dungeon, but actually get into like the world of like hex crawling and exploring. And it's not so much about the dungeon. Isle of Dread really isn't about the dungeon so much as it is about exploring this, kind of Skull Island, King Kong dinosaur world, that time lost, time forgot thing. So it's a classic for a reason. It may not hold up to modern standards, but it's a classic for a reason.
There's also one of like the earliest adventures that introduced that theme of the wilderness hex crawl. And so like you have to cut some slack for like blazing trails and like being one of the first to do something when you look back on some of these older adventures.
Yeah. Yeah, so I know Goodman Games, they did X1, they did like this original Adventures Reincarnated, and they did Isle of Dread, and they also did X2, which is Castle Amber. And I'll be honest with you, I know that there are other ones beyond that. I don't actually know them.
What do you mean?
Because because they're not as famous. You know, there's like an X series. You know,
the X ones. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I like if the B ones, like, you know, Palace of the Silver Princess, Lost City, Horror on the Hill, all that stuff. That's kind of more famous. The X series modules not as famous.
They're a little less famous. Isle of Dread is more famous because, and we'll talk about this later when we get into the Pathfinder era, the Savage Tide Adventure Path revisits the Isle of Dread, and it has way more pirates than the original Isle of Dread. And I think that makes Isle of Dread more famous than some of the other X's.
Is that the one with Demogorgon?
Yes, it is.
Yes,
Demogorgon is the BBG. Yes. So we're going to get into that. We actually almost had someone who knew a lot about.
We almost got James Jacobs to join us to talk about it.
He could have made it at 3 Pacific time, but not 3 Eastern time. But
now I know why you asked me on. Okay.
No, actually, you were asked first.
You were already on Steven's.
That was going to be a surprise for you, Derik. You would have loved it. I would be like, James Jacobs.
James Jacobs is incredible and has written some of the best stuff ever. So
I know.
Yeah.
So there is one other 1981 sort of maritime-ish adventure, which would be The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. It does have the ghost ship. I mean, it is mostly at a seaside town. There's like the evil alchemist mansion.
What is that? U1?
Yeah, it's U1.
I wonder if the U stands for like underwater.
Wait, which one?
I don't know about that. I think it says for United Kingdom series because it was made by people in the UK, maybe. I just made that up, but it is made in the UK.
Well,
I love that one, by the way.
Let's see here. I don't know. Oh, no, it's called the Underwater series.
Oh, you were right. Yeah, and I was wrong. It is the Underwater series.
Yeah, because I think U2 is like underwater. I forgot. It's all coming.
Which one is U2, that Danger of Dunwater?
U2's Danger of Dunwater, and U3 is the one the
final enemy,
big enemy or whatever. Yeah, the big villain.
Yeah. So this whole U series is, of course, that's why it's underwater. It's famous for the same reason that X1 is famous, which is that it had a remake. Ghosts of Saltmarsh in 5th edition remade not only that entire series, but also several other aquatic adventures. And I think we'll get to that when we get to talking about 5th edition adventures as well.
One of the very few that I own.
Oh, yeah. So are there any other like really early D&D adventures that are standing out to either of you for like introducing some of the early maritime, pirate, or aquatic combat?
I mean, in terms of like aquatic combat, no, not so much. I mean, clearly water traps and things like that were always, kind of a big part of that.
Sure.
But, I think by and large, ironically for me, when I think about that era, when I think about underwater adventures, I think of Final Fantasy 1, and I think about how you have to go get the Oxyale, which provides oxygen so that you can go into the underwater temple of water to, beat the Kraken. That's one of the 4 elemental fiends of chaos. So when I think Kraken and I think like the 80s, I think Final Fantasy 1, I think the Mermaid's Temple or whatever it's called, the Sunken Temple, and you need like the special thing to breathe. Because I think that's, water in D&D is like the next level beyond torches. You're in the dark, but you have your torch light. Okay. And I always feel like there's this kind of like really fun premise with these older modules where you go, yeah, but if you want the really good treasure, it's harder to get because it's guarded by tougher monsters or it's guarded by more sinister traps. But one of the core premises that you can go with is it's just underwater. And like, I think in modern day context, we think about, it's like, oh, it's the underwater part of the adventure because it fits the theme. And so naturally everybody's going to have something that lets them breathe underwater because otherwise it wouldn't work. But like in the old days, it was this idea of like, if you can figure out a way to beat this challenge of water to somehow, find a way to actually function underwater with water breathing spells or freedom of movement spells, then those kind of untapped treasure troves will be yours. Anyways, I always thought that was interesting.
I think that that's kind of more common in adventures, just to have like a little segment that involves water than to be like literally on the sea.
Yeah.
By the way, this
Part of that is that just sometimes underwater combat can get a little complicated or annoying for players. And so if you tell them, hey, we're just going to be underwater most of the time, they might be like, yeah, maybe we should play a different RPG or a different adventure than this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. It's that whole like, is the game, if is overcoming the challenge, part of the fun of the game, or does it just make the game frustrating? Right. Like, and there's definitely people who want that kind of, you got to be good player Dark Souls experience, like, oh, we're real veterans of D&D and we know how to play and we brought the appropriate, countermeasures. And other people go, well, this sucks. My weapons don't do enough damage. But also, okay, I'm going off on a tangent here, but consider back in the day, like how things have changed. So I don't exactly remember what the rules were, first edition, second edition, basic. But like by and large, I believe the rules were basically like, if you're using a bludgeoning weapon underwater and you don't have some sort of magical freedom of movement or something, it basically doesn't work. And I think slashing weapons like swords and stuff maybe did half damage or had like a penalty. And like piercing weapons like a spear or a trident, those worked fine. So the idea was that if your character went underwater with a trident, you did okay. But back in the day, a fighter's whole shtick was, I am just as good with every weapon as I am with every other weapon, because there was no like hyper specialization. There was no feat trees. There was none of that. And so the idea was, your character's like, oh, my character's the great sword fighter. I'm the sword and board character. And you're like, okay, well, we're going in the water. And at that time you go, cool, I grab a trident. And it didn't matter really in terms of the context of the game. And you didn't like need your weapon to be a certain magical bonus or magical potency. That wasn't part of the context of the math of the game. And so you could just grab a trident, grab a spear, dive in the water, and you were good to go. But in the context of a modern game, if you still have those rules in place and suddenly you tell the character who's super specialized into dual wielding maces, well, those weapons don't really work underwater. Well, they're like, okay, well then my character doesn't function effectively. And I'm not going to rebuild my character just for this like one underwater part or this, one adventure. And you also don't want to tell that player, well, I guess you should have thought about that before you took a feat to let you, use maces and, punish them for building the character that they built. So I'm kind of two minds of that.
Well, okay.
I said a lot there.
Do we talk about this now or later? Because Mark, no, because in our adventure, in my, where is it? Here it is. Oh, pull out this monster. Oh, Jewel the Indigo Isle, which is a pirate-themed adventure. There's an entire, bit of a spoiler, but there's an entire part that is underwater. And I went through very specific ways to deal with that, to handle that so that you don't have to rebuild your entire character and it still works. So... did we talk about that?
Yeah, there are techniques that you can use when you're doing that. You want to take into account what magical effects are available, as Derik mentioned. You might even make magical effects available for the PCs so that you know exactly what they're going to have. You can think about what areas that are underwater might be a little bit different to move in than normal in a way that might make it easier to run. If the PCs are very, very unbuoyant and are kind of sunk to the bottom and are walking along the bottom, that may be a little easier to deal with than the 3D movement, for example. Or if you're in an area that still has some trapped air that's underwater, then there can be sections where you're not kind of swimming and constantly using the aquatic combat rules, for example. And those were the kind of concepts Stephen looked into for Jewel of the Indigo Isles as well.
Yeah, I'm curious how many people in chat have ever actually like ran an underwater, type nautical type adventure or a campaign.
I've run quite long adventures.
All right. Well, the reason I ask is because Knights of the Last Call is currently gearing up to do. We are still gearing up to do our Pathfinder 2 mega campaign, season 3 of Northern Reaches, but we're launching a new one, which is based using Dragonbane, and it's going to be called Dragon Tide. And it is certainly inspired by, famous archipelagos, such as perhaps the Jeweled Isles, the Indigo Isles,
Ooh.
and but also Earthsea, which is my favorite book of all time, the series. And anyways, and so I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't feel like I've used water as much as I maybe should have over the years.
It's tricky. It's really tricky. I mean, kind of without giving out those spoilers, kind of what I did for Jewel, and when Mark explained, there's two things. A, you basically just make air pockets and make water kind of in the background, kind of a theme. Like, you know, it's like, oh, you're underwater, but you're in the pocket. So it's like, it's out there and it can do things to you if you're not careful, but it doesn't really affect the gameplay at all. The other way I've done it is that you use them kind of as traps so that, yes, you're underwater, but in an air pocket, but things will fill up, or you need to navigate certain areas that have water. So, and those are kind of the scary parts. So it's like, oh, we got to go from this room to that room. We got to go through water. It's like, uh-oh, you know, like things like that. And then my favorite way of doing it is, oh man, it's such a spoiler, but is that you basically have, you're in an area and suddenly it starts to fill up with water very quickly and start counting rounds, because every round or two things change and the rules change and you need to start contending with the water rules. And that's a little bit more complex, but as long as you do it in a combat setting and just make it part of combat itself and part of, like, you know, the pluses and minuses people get, I think it's okay, because then it's just a very limited scope. It's not like, okay, we're going to be using underwater rules for the next 2 months. I think that will drive people insane. But if you're like, okay, this one combat is going to be using these special rules, and now you can only move half speed, or you can move in 3D, or you can only move, you know, use these types of weapons, or if you're casting a spell, you need to make a you know, concentration check, something like that, then they'll be like, okay, that's fine, because it's just for this one combat, you know, and that's almost acceptable. Like, they'll usually accept that. And also, on top of that, if you are really smart, which most adventurers do, is you give them some ways to deal with that ahead of time, like potions of water breathing, or, you know, anything that could just make their lives a little easier, so that, okay, they're not totally nerfed underwater, but you still have some water effects, like maybe they move slower, or their weapons don't do quite as much damage, or the spells are a little harder to cast.
What Steven's presenting is a very application of a very classic piece of GM advice, which is spices for your encounter to make them interesting, complicated, or more than a simple encounter are something that you can find in a lot of GM guides. The Game Master Guide or GM Core for Pathfinder 2 specifically talks about these, and it also specifically says, but don't do that all the time. You don't want to throw tons of spice on everything, because it's just going to lead to fatigue. And since underwater is a spice, it means that you're going to potentially run into some issues if you're using a D&D or Pathfinder system and you're constantly underwater. And that's kind of exactly what Steven was getting at there.
So let me ask you a question specific to Pathfinder, but I mean, it applies to 5e as well, I suppose. And third edition as well. There's a section about this, but I'm curious how this works in the context of Pathfinder 2 specifically. Is, you know, if we threw, I don't think Pathfinder 2 has this, but, you know, if we threw the party against a ferocious band of like Kuatoa, right? And they were underwater. Kuatoa have tridents and nets and, you know, all the classic Kuatoa badness, and you're fighting underwater, and there's the, you know, you're the kelp forest beds, and people have swim speeds, and you have a party that may have some of the accoutrements that Stephen was talking about, but they're not fully equipped for this environment. They don't all have swim speeds, and they don't all have the perfect weapons, and they might be taking penalties, and the fire wizard isn't casting, you know, their fireball spell very effectively or whatever. How do you judge that from a challenge rating, experience point gaining point of view?
Well, you should take into account what the actual situation is. And Pathfinder 2 mentions that this isn't just about underwater. It can happen anytime. You have enemy snipers up on the high ground that's hard to reach, or you just forgot about some aspect of the combat that gave the enemies a huge advantage. in some situations, it's just going to push up the difficulty rating of an encounter by a level, just entirely alone for the situation. And it could push down if you have a situation where you have like fish folk or sea devils or something that are forced to come out on land with their horrible land speed, and the PCs who are shooting them like literal fish out of water. And you can maybe say that one is a level lower than expected. Whereas like a kind of expected situation is the aquatic enemies are in the water like they expect to be, and the PCs are taking some kind of precaution. They knew they were going to be fighting in the water. That's kind of like and they're okay in the water. They don't have a character who loses like half their stuff. That's kind of like the kind of maybe more average case.
Does that mean then, from a perspective of the game, that the party that goes in to the aquatic adventure and it goes on water and has some of the appropriate spells to basically make them function, to the point where the GM says, okay, I'm not going to make these encounters, I'm not going to make this moderate a severe because the group is well equipped, versus the party that has none of those precautions and they're kind of really struggling? Does that mean that the party that is really struggling is going to get more experience? And
not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
The GM should take into account that it's more difficult. But if the GM just made if the players made something harder on them, that doesn't necessarily mean they earn more XP. Like if they choose never to cast any spells,
right,
and the GM knows that, and they're like, by the way, my wizard is not going to cast any spells.
Right.
Not even cantrips.
Oh, not even cantrips. Okay.
Not even cantrips.
Crossbow. Just crossbow.
Crossbow and my stick. I'm just letting you know. And the GM's like, okay, so you're basically doing very little. Like, yeah. Like the GM should know that when building encounters, that they basically have almost one fewer party member.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean they get extra XP because the wizard is wearing those training weights only to take off later. It's like, I've decided to cast spells now. It just means that you build encounters expecting that. But if it's sort of like self-imposed situation, then I wouldn't necessarily give more XP. Whereas if it's GM imposed, say you made the characters going there at a level where they obviously couldn't have taken any precautions, there wasn't anything they could do, and you knew that, and there was no hope other than just fighting it there, maybe you should give it, because any party would have to deal with that.
That's fair. That's actually fair.
By the way, we have 73 people watching and 5 likes, which is pathetic. So if we get 50 likes, I think we're going to make Derik sing a sea shanty.
No, not today.
Oh, yes.
I'm literally sick.
So am I. Maybe Mark
singing.
will sing it then.
No singing.
Say a sea shanty. Sea shanties.
I mean, Linda did a bit of a sea shanty for one of the other Kraken Week videos. I can try to see if I can get
get Linda to sing
her audio file of the
just
the
have her
recording
walk
of
into
that.
the room and do it.
Math guy Dave, I appreciate that. That's the kind of support I need today.
Well,
look,
Linda,
engagement is engagement.
You can just like if Mark or I do it or Derik, but not if Linda does it. Linda will have a lovely singing voice, I'm sure.
So,
well,
I want to check with something. What do you guys think about M1 Into the Maelstrom? Does it count?
M1 Into the Maelstrom.
Yeah, the level 25 to 30 adventure where you are technically starting on the ocean in your ship and you're caught into a maelstrom and you go to the Star Kingdoms.
No, like by the time you're that high level, like what are challenges anyways? You know what I mean? Like
I never even read that one.
I'm saying,
that
does it count for our topic as like an aquatic or maritime because you are on a ship?
Well, you know what? I was thinking you could almost include like not Starfinder, like
Spelljammer?
Yeah, Spelljammer, because it's like outer space and the underwater are basically the same thing, if you really wanted to get crazy.
Well, yeah, and we could still talk about, we can go into second edition and third edition. But, I think, we were talking about the ships there specifically, and you mentioned Spelljammer, but before that, but, going back to Salt Marsh, right? I remember they even sold, well, with the fifth edition, they sold like a big ship mini that people could have. So one of the problems that I've always had with ships is, giving everybody something to do. And there's a natural inclination. People want to help out. And like in some games, like for example, in Scum and Villainy is a great example of this. There's a Scum and Villainy is like you're playing Firefly, right? You got your Serenity. And there's a class called the Pilot, and believe it or not, they're really, really good at flying the ship. But there's no, but because of the way that game works, there's no like initiative system stuff like that. You can have a really cool, pilot scene, and they get to fly their ship through the crazy maelstrom, make a couple of checks, and then you're moving on to the next scene. So you don't really feel the need to be like, hey, what about the guy that's the big gun toting warrior that isn't really an engineer or isn't a pilot? Like, how do you give him something to do on the ship? And the answer is you don't. You don't.
No, guess who solved that problem? Me. Because we have a whole section called Aboard the Ship. Bit of a spoiler, where you are on a ship in Jewel the Indigo Isle, and I have something for everyone to do that just has a little bit of fun, a little bit of flavor, that anyone can do, and is based on their class and abilities and levels, whether they have something specific or generic, and won't take that long unless you wanted to. You could add more to it. It just adds a little fun, a little flavor, and it's something you do between traveling, between adventures. So
yeah,
it's very, very, very minor. I would not consider it as entirely solving Derik's problem, but it does show that Steven was thinking about that issue and was trying to make it better.
I went through. There's things you do. We have specific encounters, specific role playing, specific things you can search for.
I would say like Starfinder's ship combat system for like
way better than
for as much as it had other things in it. It did give the engineer a specific task to do, and it gave the scientist a specific task to do, and it gave each person their own role.
And you're right, but I'm saying I wonder. My natural inclination is to do like what you're saying with Starfinder, but my wondering is maybe if Steven isn't the actually correct here, which is because for me, I could be wrong here, and I don't fully know the Starfinder Star Combat rules, but one of the biggest problems I have with a lot of these things is like a lot of these systems, that are detailed, that want you to spend a lot of time and focus here, just kind of basically end up being like, make a check. And that's fine if make a check is quick, fast. It's a little bit of a flavorful little thing. You do a little bit of role playing, a little bit of fluffy bullshit time, and then you get to the next adventure because you came here to play Pathfinder 2 and participate in that core gameplay pattern, not adventure on the high seas. It's cool that we're acknowledging it and we're spending 5 or 10 minutes with this little vignette and maybe a couple of checks that make my character feel like oh yeah, you're doing something cool on the ship. But when you try to turn it into a system, I feel like you run into this problem where it becomes really boring because, combat and flank, you have all these other crazy cool options available to your character. But a lot of times on the ship, it's like, make a piloting check. Okay. Pass. There's no like choice. It's just like, you're the guy who sat at the pilot. And of course you are. You're the one with the best piloting skill. Like it's kind of like a non-agent. It's a low agency.
So I wrote this system with Ron Lundeen originally. I know Mark tweaked it later. And he and I, when I wrote the system, was very specific that this is all flavor. Like, it is literally just there for flavor and fun. Everything's automatic. Like, you don't need to, there's no checks to get to the next place. Nothing requires you to do anything.
You're kind of fishing for seaweed resources.
Yes, you're
in between. That's basically what it is.
Yeah.
I don't really feel it's a spoiler or it gives anything away to say that you're doing that.
Yeah, you're fishing.
And Derik, that's just like the thing that you said might be ideal. It's barely a thing. It doesn't take very long, but it does give you something to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could talk to people, and there's like little fun things, like role-playing stuff. But that's it. And they're literally designed as interludes and vignettes between traveling, just to give you the feel of being on a boat without actually having to do it.
Right. I know that. Yeah. My failing is that, and again, I'm not a game designer, nor do I pretend to be one. But my failing is, it's like I would want to turn that into some sort of mini game.
Well, guess what?
That's like my natural inclination, right?
And people have asked that on the Discord, and we have pointed them to other books because there's other resources out there that do that. And we're like, okay, if you want to do that, here's a resource that you can get, like an Infinite, that will do that for you. There's lots of other systems. The book was only 430 pages. I didn't need any. There's no more systems needed. Like, look, it's just there for fun. The boat is whatever you want it to be. If you wanted to go crazy with the boat and your players, so be it. But I did not do that. We have, I think the whole ship area is like 4 to 6 pages, and that's
and again, and I don't necessarily know that that's not the right, or that might be the right decision. And the reason I bring that up is because we are doing this mega community game of, which some people erroneously call West Marches, but I don't like that term because it's not West March. But anyways, but the idea is that, we have, hopefully 30, 40, 50 players all playing Dragonbane, and there's a bunch of different GMs, and the GMs are each going to have their own island. And you're going to be able to, like, there's one big port city, and all the players get on a boat and they sail to the GM's island, and then you have an adventure on the island. You explore it and go into dungeons and fight dinosaurs and, find buried treasure, whatever. So the question was, they was like, well, it's on the ocean. We want boats to matter. So we feel like there should be something that represents that voyage, that fade, that ship trace. But the thing is, people go, okay, but this is only, this is even a campaign. This is basically, you're playing with this group. You may never play with this group again. So we're like, we don't want to spend 45 minutes or an hour out of our maybe 3-hour session just getting to the place where we actually want to go adventure. So what's the right size to that? How do we make that feel like important with hopefully some interesting choices the players get to make?
I know, wow. Very easy. Actually doing exactly what I did. So you have a meta currency in the game. And the meta currency is something you can get between when you're on the ship, and it would be something very simple mechanism that's almost like a random based luck table, so that it doesn't need to be heavily balanced. It can almost be like a slot machine mechanic where, if you roll a 1d100 or 1d20 and you get a 20, you get something cool. If you get like low, you get something, nothing great, and then you can use that later for nothing that will give you balance issues, but maybe for fun. And that way it would work no matter who is playing what, because it's a meta currency that everyone can use.
And then you get excited about having a journey because it's a chance to get that meta currency.
Yeah, I like that.
That's basically what Steven did.
Yeah. That's what I did, by the way.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Especially that's even easier in Dragonbane because balance isn't really a thing in Dragonbane. There's no levels, there's no challenge ratings or anything like that. So
and you make them fun things. You don't have to make it's like, oh, you get like a hat, or something, or you get a cool sword, and that just looks cool. And then way you can.
Don't underestimate the value of vanity items.
Oh, I was about to say, entire billion-dollar MMOs are based on vanity items. There's the hat.
I want this mount. I want this hat. Does it go any faster?
There's the Steam, of course. There's the Steam-based. They used to call that in Dota, not Dota, in in
League of Legends?
No, the other one that everyone plays. The
Dota.
No, the other one. That's first-person shooter.
Overwatch.
No, the other one that was before Overwatch. But you know what I'm talking about is the hat-based economy where.
Oh, Team Fortress.
Team Fortress. God, thank you. Team Fortress, which. It's impossible because everyone has to be perfectly balanced, but yet they make billions of dollars off people buying hats. Yeah. So you better believe there's an entire vanity-based economy, and you just do the same thing. That's how you do it. You just make a vanity-based economy and do a meta currency that everyone gets. That's all.
So before we move into second edition, I guess one more that is on an island and has a little bit of ships would be Lost Island of Castanamir C3. But that's mostly a tournament module that's on the island once you get there.
Right. And again, it speaks to the point that, and we could look at this, but most of these adventures might involve the thing being on the water, but very few of them actually, at least back in the day, really dealt with like you just spending a significant amount of time under it or actively in it. It was usually like, oh, you take your ship and you get to the cool island, right?
Right. But when we moved into like the 90s, the late 90s in second edition, we get the Sea of Blood series. And the Sea of Blood series was very much about dealing with...
Is that the one with the Sahagin?
Yeah, it's dealing with the Sahagin and the stuff that's going on with Sekola, the shark.
The shark guy. The
shark goddess Sekola, and you have to deal with all of that stuff. It is Evil Tide, Night of the Shark, and Sea of Blood is the final one. Yeah, and it's also what the name of the series generally is called.
Yeah, I remember. I never owned those, but I definitely remember seeing them. That was like part of that late 90s TSR era stuff where they did like the the sort of monstrous themed adventures, and they tried to like create like a series of adventures themed around a certain monster.
They had novels about the event of all the Sahuagin like doing stuff at that time, so it was like a whole tie-in event about like aquatic situations.
All right, in like a few sentences, Mark, explain to me, like for people who are uninformed, but in a way that would make them feel different. What is the difference between Sahuagin and a Kuo-toa?
Okay, I will explain it in as short of a way as possible.
I congratulate you,
person?
Derek. Wait, I give Derek 2 hero points because that is the most Mark question I've ever heard on this stream.
All right, so evil shark person and evil fish person.
Got it.
Oh,
okay.
God, he knew too. He knew.
That's the shortest way to explain it.
Got it. But other than that, they're basically the same.
They're fairly similar, but like Sahuagin are just like, you know, they'll go into a blood frenzy like sharks. They're out for that. With Kuo-toa, they might be more likely to like have like monasteries or temples. Not that Sahuagin don't have any religion, but that Kuo-toa just have a ton of situations where you'll find like their weird eldritch gods from beyond the stars that are like giving them this strange sect in a temple that they're worshiping somewhere down there.
We can do a whole new thing. Stump Mark Seifter. Okay, Mark, tell me the difference between a demon and a daemon.
Okay, so demons are a chaotic evil being from the abyss, whereas daemons are a neutral evil being from Abaddon or Hades or the Grey Waste. Oh. Now, demons are also sometimes known as Tanari, back when there was a satanic panic, where demons were known as Yugoloths. In D&D cosmology, the Yugoloths / daemons are kind of mercs. They're mercenaries who will fight on either side in the blood war between devils and demons, and they just kind of want to do their own thing. It allows people to use them as a wild card. They're probably playing both sides, and there's a lot of lore about that. Whereas demons are very much in the just like tear everything down situation. They also are a little more well loved with all of their many famous demon lords than the daemons are.
That being said, I don't remember what edition it was. Probably second edition, but it could have been third edition. But one of the daemons, I think is it the Ultra Daemon? Ultradaemon?
Yeah, the Ultraloth.
The Ultraloth, that's it, the Ultraloth. That thing was scary. That thing was like nasty.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty. That was like the Ultraloth, I think, is like their version of like the Pit Fiend or the Baylor, right?
By the way,
yeah, pretty much.
Someone mentioned Pirate Borg, which I bought. It's like the one thing I bought at Origins, by the way. And I opened it up right to the page with the Kraken, which is kind of funny. And on top of that,
I only bought 2 things at Origins, and one of them was also from the people who make Pirate Borg, because I bought it with Steven, is this guide to naval
combat.
I know, it's like a weird coincidence. I know, it's weird. So anyhow, I opened right up to the Kraken, but the thing I like more than the Kraken is the undead Megalodon. I was like, damn, I think that's scarier than the Kraken.
Megalodons are pretty awesome.
Megalodons are awesome. The thing about Kraken is a true Kraken. My favorite Kraken of all time is in the Pirates of the Caribbean. Remember, the Kraken takes is basically destroying the ship, and then they go in the water, and then you see, and there's no reason for that shot other than coolness. So I have to give them full credit, because it's like they spent whatever hundreds of $1,000s for a 2-second shot of showing the bottom part of the Kraken underwater just for awesomeness. And it's like, damn, because you only see the top and you actually saw the whole thing, and it just takes the ship and just eats it, and that's it. There's nothing you can do. I mean, it's too big, it's too powerful,
to be fair,
too strong.
In my personal opinion, especially in that second movie, they did kind of overplay the whole release the Kraken. Like the first time it happens, scary. The second time it happens, it's like, oh shit. And then like by the time they do it like the third or fourth time, you're like, I'm over this.
That second movie is considered. Now we're going to the movie section. In movie circles, peak, and I don't know if we've actually beaten it, which is amazing because the movie's almost 20 years old. Peak visual effects And visual effects have strangely gotten worse since then in many ways. And if you look at that movie now, it's first beyond holds up. The special effects in that movie are ridiculous how good they are. Especially it's actually the thumbnail for this episode. Not Sparrow. Davy Jones with the squid head, and every tentacle moves, and I'm like, oh my god, it's like the amount of work they did for that thing, and it was done in daylight, which is impossible. Anyhow, that's just an aside. If you want to see, probably, I mean, all three of those movies are so good, but that second one is stunningly good and stunningly disgusting. I was like, mentioning that movie is really repulsive. It's so gross, that movie. Which is another thing about C is that there's a lot of like horror, like when it comes to C. Like C and horror, it's almost like the two things. Because as a kid, the thing that scared me for the longest time, and only when I started to dive that I get over it, was like underwater, not like 10 feet underwater, like
deep water. Thalassophobia,
yes,
specifically, not aquaphobia.
Yes, and it really would creep me out, and like to the point that when I was a kid, we'd go to Disney World and we'd go on the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ride. I was scared because it was like, even though you weren't like 10 feet under the water, but it's like that whole feeling, and I was terrified to go diving, but it broke me of it, because actually I love diving now, but it definitely was. It's like that whole thing of, Dunwich horror, Cthulhuoid, like water and horror is such a good combination. It really is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, right. Like what's the saying that we have more of the moon surface mapped than the bottom of the ocean? There's a primal fear there.
I think it's like less than 2% of the ocean's been mapped, which is ridiculous. Every day they find a new species. Like you can look it up. They're like, oh, we found these two new. Like every day they're finding new things because it's just so big.
And it's full of microplastics.
Oh, that I don't even want to get. That's so gross. Yeah,
oh boy.
Bad. Anyhow,
but anyways, but yeah, no. So now we're getting closer to third edition.
Yeah. So, is there any other major aquatic adventures in second?
Oh,
because
in second.
There are so many in the 3.x era.
So I did do a quick look, and I will say that there was a supplement for arguably for Forgotten Realms, but really it was part of Al-Qadim, and it was called Corsairs of the Great Sea.
Yeah.
It was, and that was
was that an adventure?
It was an adventure and a source book, but basically contained pirate adventures. And so I do not own that one. I was not a big Al-Qadim fan. Ironically, in my youth, I really hated any sort of historical context to my games. Like I hated the green books, right? From second edition, right? What was it? The Celts. There was the Roman one, right? You know what I'm talking about? The green books, the green cover books. But it's funny, as like an adult and in my 30s and in my 40s, I became much more interested in these sort of more historical touched game books. And now I wish I had those green cover books. But anyways, case in point, Al-Qadim never interested me really, because I was just like, okay, well, this is fantasy, fantasy Arabia. But now I'm like, oh, I think that actually is pretty cool. I think that would be kind of interesting to explore that culture through role-playing games. Anyways, but that apparently existed. I didn't know that.
Yeah, second edition, weirdly, I'm one of those people that I know a huge amount about second edition, but only because I played Baldur's Gate 1, Baldur's Gate 2, Icewind Dale 1, Icewind Dale 2, like that's how I know. That's my that's my D&D second edition.
I mean, I just played a lot of AD&D second edition up until about 90.
We never played it. I was in college then, so it came out when I was in college, and I bought it and I read it, but we never played it.
I played it a bunch. I did not play almost any from pre-second edition. I played a little bit, but I played a bunch of second edition, and then everything after second edition, except fourth, I had a smaller amount of than the other ones.
But yeah, I mean, we that's basically the edition that was when I learned how to play. It was second edition, and we played that up till about 98 because by then it was kind of getting a little long in the tooth, and we were playing like Dragonlance Saga, and we picked up like older games, like, or not older games at the time, but like Earth Dawn, and we were trying a bunch of new kind of fantasy dice games. But anyways, yeah, no, I'm not super familiar with the adventures, because while I owned, all the books with the kits, and I owned a couple of, a lot of the campaign settings, I didn't back then. I don't think I ever ran an adventure, like a published adventure. I think I ran everything I did. I made myself, because I was a kid. I had infinite time, and that was the way it was done. At least in my mind. So.
Yeah,
that's basically true for me as well. My knowledge of some of these older adventures is more academic than from using it in practice, because I ran my own adventures when I was a kid.
Right. Like I didn't play B1, B2, X1 until much later, actually, kind of like when the OSR started, and I got more into that. So
we played all the originals because that's how old I am. And then 2 came out. I remember going to the store, buying it. I was real excited. I bought second edition. The rule set, and read through. We never played it. No one I knew really played it. I was in college. We were into computer games more back then. But I did learn the rules because every computer game used it. I played every single D&D adventure computer game, like more than thousands, not even hundreds, thousands of hours. But also, I wasn't reading Dragon Magazine. But then when third edition came out, that's when I got heavy into Dragon Magazine, and then we started to play the adventure paths, and then I was just devouring everything. So
yeah, I started with second edition, but I consider like third edition to be like my edition. It came out right after I got out of high school, and we just really embraced that. What kind of has been what are the Mark will know. What do you call it? What do you call it when something is named something later? It wasn't called that at the time, but then they kind of retroactively, like, as a retronym.
When something like kind of gets a name,
like a retronym or something. I don't know. Maybe that's the term. Anyways, at the time when the third edition came out, they released a series of adventures that were extremely loosely linked, and nowadays it's called the third edition adventure path, even though it's not really an adventure path. This is, of course, Sunless Citadel, Forge of Fury, Speaker in Dreams, goodness gracious, Knifing Spire, Deep Horizon, Lord of the Iron Fortress, and Bastion of Broken Souls.
The one with the Chardalon at the end.
The one with our Chardalon at the end. And like there's little Easter eggs, but it's not like an adventure path in the sense of like this is all one big mega story. Like each of these adventures is 100% standalone. It has only the most loosest of ties, but it's been sort of retconned into being called an adventure path. Anyways, one of those adventures, which arguably is the worst one, is called Deep Horizon, and Deep Horizon is for level 13 characters of third edition D&D, and I did run it, and it is the first adventure in that series where you like go down into the Underdark, and it's actually it should be a really classic adventure. I just don't know if it was like written badly. Because part of the problem that I think a lot of people have with the adventure is that whoever wrote it, I don't remember who wrote that one, but it might have been Rich Baker. Is that right? Who wrote Deep Horizon Adventure?
I'm not sure. That's a good question. I know about the series. I should try to remember who all the authors are. But...
It was Skip Williams. Okay, so they wrote it and they created this like new race / monster called the Desmodu, which were like these bat people,
right?
And they were like a little too obsessed with them, and it was like there was like way too much information about these bat people that no one cared about. But the reason why this was a really cool adventure is if you had only been playing these adventures, you had been gone. Now you're up to 13th level. This is the first adventure where there's beholders. This is the first adventure where there are salamanders. This is the first adventure where there's a bunch of classic D&D monsters. But in the first part of the adventure, you find this old abandoned drow city that is underground in this ancient lake. And in this ancient underground underdark lake is a Kraken.
Kraken.
And I have a great Kraken story because we did play this adventure. And a couple levels earlier, one of our buddies who had been playing a cleric of St. Cuthbert had left our campaign, and we had some new players come in, including one of our buddies who was playing a dwarf barbarian, a lot of damage, and Smith, Mr. Aaron Smith, set aside his dwarf fighter, and he made a new character for this sort of second part of the campaign named Ambrielle, who was a multi-class paladin cleric, mostly cleric, but with just a few levels of paladin to, get like the divine favor and the saving throw stuff and all that other stuff. Anyways, very, very, very much I'm a kind of a support bot. I'm a heal bot. And, he leaned into that. Oh, he was an ASMR because we're making the characters later in the campaign. So he got to be an ASMR because of the ECL, for those of you who know what that is. Anyways, long story short, his character was just this healer. And this was 3.0, mind you. So we get to this fight versus this Kraken, and the barbarian with his big greatsword is like, I'm going to do all this damage. And then we had an elven ranger, dual weapon wielding, and I'm going to do the most damage. And this is where we learned how broken clerics and specifically cleric archery was in 3.0, because in 3.0 you could cast greater magic weapon on both your bow and your arrows, and they stacked. And it stacks.
And sure did, Derik.
And obviously the Kraken was evil, so this paladin cleric had essentially plus 10 weapons and was smiting. And I mean, he embarrassed the barbarian. He embarrassed the ranger. It wasn't even close. And he was also like flying, right? Like 200 feet above the water. And I mean, you could just imagine like these, like almost like they look like probably like thermal lances from like a satellite orbiting space, like these massive holy bolts of energy streaking down to this poor Kraken that had no recourse. But it was an awesome fight. But it was really funny because it was just like, holy crap, this is so powerful. And that was the first time in third edition that we had fought a Kraken. And I don't know that we've ever really fought one since. I that may have been my one and only fight. True, honest to God. Not like you're in the ship and the tentacles come up. I mean, like
that happens so often.
That happens all the time. I'm talking about like D&D. Here's my big Kraken mini. I'm putting it on the battlefield. You're fighting this thing. Let's go. Wait,
I did the exact same thing. Remember when they came out with that red dragon mini? That's this big?
The colossal red?
Which I still have. By the way, it's worth
biggest regret of my life.
It's worth like $500 or something.
I didn't buy it. I remember it was at Gen Con. It was $100, and I went, "I'm no way I'm buying this thing."
You can sell. They're on eBay. They're 100. They're I think 5, 6, 7. They're very expensive.
You can sort of see mine behind Linda in the video we just did about building the Kraken ancestry because it's on my shelf.
I have it in my attic, and I literally ran an adventure and made something just to use that. But it was an illusion. It was like they were like kids said someone made an illusion in Greyhawk of it appearing. It was actually during Age of Worms. They were only like level 5, but I'm like, I got to figure out a way to get this mini in there because they didn't know about it.
Even you and I had the same idea. I ran an adventure where people got Honey I Shrunk the Kids. And so the wizard's pseudo dragon familiar was the correct size to be that giant colossal. So I'm going to use this now. So I actually got it because even back then I like watching like news. So I would get the latest news of anything. Mm-hmm. So I got news, I think from like Ian World or somewhere back then that was like Wizards is changing the price of this thing from like 50 or whatever it was to $100.
Yeah.
And, so I looked and Amazon still had it at 50. So I bought it on Amazon for 50, figuring that they would either tell me that I had to up it or get rid of it or something, but they actually honored the price of 50.
Wow.
And so I usually wouldn't have bought something that expensive, but I thought I could get it for half of what it was going to be changed to be. And I guess it's now worth 500, you said, Stephen? Mine probably isn't because I actually used it and didn't just keep it in a shrink wrap.
Yeah, I don't have the box or anything, but still it's I went to
I think it's like 7 by 7.
A complete strategist. in Manhattan, and I saw it and I bought it because I was at the time
Colossal Plus,
it was so
Mark.
huge.
It's
I was
Colossal
like, oh my God.
Plus.
And then Colossal Plus. I was just like, I just bought it because it was so damn cool. Anyway, and it was like $100, which back then was like $250. You know, I mean, really expensive. And of course, I'm like, I just have to figure out a way to use it. And the character I played with, I remember, he was so. It was like kids who played a prank on him, and then it just showed up, and then it disappeared. He was so mad that in game, he's like, I get the cops, I call the cops on the kids, I throw them in jail. I'm like, oh my God, calm down, Bob. Like, I embarrassed him because he thought it was real. And because I put down the mini and it actually did its job. It was so impressive that they were actually stunned because I snuck it in like a bag. And I guess no one knew about it. It wasn't, the internet wasn't around back then like it is now. So no one knew that was coming.
It's funny that you mentioned that because we're talking about how awesome it would be if we were doing a studio show. Yeah. Because a couple years ago, maybe now, I guess it was probably a couple years ago, wotc released a massive Tiamat mod.
I saw that thing. That thing is ridiculous.
Not the small. There's like an avatar of Tiamat one, not that one. I'm talking about
the aspect of Tiamat.
Yeah.
Well, it was a gamma, by the way, because it was like something they showed to retailers to buy.
Yeah.
So we saw
and it was like it was $500-$600 retail,
it's insane.
But we joked about if the group didn't know it, and we were playing like on our our show, playing our game in person, live to the community, and I rigged something up where in the final battle, this mini just like gets lowered down on like fishing line or something, and just watching all the players' reactions as this like lazy Susan sized mini just kind of comes descending down. Like, here's the thing: that mini is going to be used exactly once.
That's how often I used mine. I used mine exactly once.
I used mine once, but I used it almost exactly the same way as you, Steven. I had a big backpack that I stored all my books in, but I secretly had carried some of the books. People didn't pay attention to the fact that there should have been more, not more books. And the backpack was still very full. That's because the red dragon was in there. And so I suddenly undid the backpack and pulled out the red dragon and stuck it on there, and people were freaking out about being attacked by the red dragon. Before they figured out they were shrunk, they just realized there was something weird about the village they were in, and the missing people who had gone missing were also there because they had been miniaturized as well.
It had that cool plastic.
It had the plastic fire,
flame
that
drop.
you added to it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
And the
Very
funny
cool
thing is, you know what? It was a one-time thing because I remember I went back to Complete Strategist, and then they had one bigger. Do you remember that? It was like the Gold Dragon. It was like one above that one. I was like, you got me once. I'm not doing it again because the next one was like $200. I was like, okay, I can only buy one of those in my life.
I have the gargantuan black dragon, but I do not have.
Oh, I have that one as well.
One too.
Yeah,
that one actually I have in my office. I have it right over there.
Did Wizards of the Coast ever put out a Kraken mini?
That's a good question. We should have answered that for Kraken Week. We looked at so many adventures, but we didn't look to see if they have a Kraken mini.
I'm looking now.
We should have done that. I guess it would be
there's a lot
one
of
of their
Kraken
partners who did it.
WizKids has a. Let's see. WizKids has.
I mean, there's some 8K resin prints, Bob. If you're curious.
So Nolzar's D&D Nolzar's Marvelous Miniatures seems to have a Kraken.
Yeah, there's a couple out there.
Oh, I see it. Yeah, from WizKids for $35.
Icons of the Realm, Monsters of the Menagerie 3 is a Kraken.
I can't tell the scale for that because it has a rowboat, but is that like the size? Is that like to scale?
No, the Kraken has. Well, this one has a Kraken head, 6 tentacles, a rowboat, 2 sandbars, treasure chest, and a pile of treasure.
That's what I'm saying, though. But if you look at that image, is that to scale? Oh, maybe this is scale. That's actually pretty big. Oh, that's actually kind of sick.
Yeah,
that is actually pretty cool looking.
That's actually pretty cool.
Sold out.
Yeah,
sold out. You can't get it. It existed.
Oh, that's all right. I'm sure there's someone you could 3D print it, or something equivalent.
You know what? If you ended up going to Gen Con, I bet you there'll be 100 Krakens there for you.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But I was a big fan of of those adventures, and fighting the Kraken was really cool. And sure, it died really very unceremoniously, but it was pretty neat. I remember there's some random facts about the 3rd edition Kraken that I do remember, and I wanted to double check, so I hopped over to the wiki. But it had its tentacles, but then it had its 2 main tentacles, and they had 100-foot reach, which at that time in the game was just like crazy, you know.
Those are its 2 main arms instead of the 8 smaller tentacles.
Right. But the real because this is what I love about 3rd edition, but one of the coolest things about this is like when you would see like a dragon or certain critical monsters, there would be a treasure, and sometimes it would say like as standard, or it would say like 50% goods, 50% coin, or something like that. But there were some monsters like the dragon that would say things like double standard. So this monster was worth double treasure. The Kraken was worth triple standard treasure, because the Kraken wasn't just some mindless brute, right? It was the idea was that it was this like extremely intelligent, ancient, you know, almost kind of like an aboleth, but on steroids. And I always thought that was really, really cool. But yeah, I thought it was a really cool monster, even though it served its role as a foil to the PC to allow the paladin cleric to look like a badass. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Actually,
very cool
the
stuff.
adventure I'm doing now, because we're playing Agents of Edgewatch, and we're up to the end of book 5. And in book 5, they end up encountering, I'm just double checking here, it's a Shoggoth. It's not a Kraken.
Yeah, that's a different kind of tentacles.
Equivalent thing.
Yeah, it's still pretty cool. It looks like it's close, but
although I'll give you guys.
Shoggoth.
I'll give you guys some. If you ever found yourself playing 3rd edition, I don't know if this will work in Pathfinder. It probably works. It probably works in Pathfinder 1, but I don't know if it'll work in 5th edition. But I do have some tech for you, some Kraken tech.
Okay.
Now, because the Kraken, like the aboleth, and the reason why I know this is because we did this to an aboleth, not to a Kraken, but they're in the same ballpark. The Kraken has the aquatic type.
Yes, it does.
And that means that it cannot breathe air. It drowns in the air. And there exists, especially by the time you fight this monster at this level of the game, control water is a very, very, very high, like very, very effective spell, because all it does is make water go up or down. Well, you can make water go down, even if there's nowhere for it to go to. So if you fight a Kraken, you can literally lower the water and just drown it, because it can't breathe air and it has no way to move otherwise. It only has a swim speed.
That does work all the way through Pathfinder 1. Okay. And a water kineticist can do that control water effect all the time.
By the way, so I made a mistake. I knew I made a mistake. In this adventure, this is like way at the end, is that they're level 17. The Kraken is level 18. And the main bad guy was actually tortured and turned into the bad guy himself because of an evil Kraken, and he took revenge by finding the Kraken, imprisoning it, and then you end up finding the Kraken, his former master, Levilar, and then you end up, hopefully, I guess we're going to find out, they can befriend the Kraken and then use the Kraken to destroy the bad guy.
So they actually are releasing the Kraken to fight against the other thing.
That is why the Agents of Edgewatch is maybe my favorite. It might be up there. It's up there second. It's my second, but it's so good. It's every 80s and 70s movie trope in one adventure. It's so good. I love it. So
back in the 3.0, 3.5 PF1 era, there are a lot of aquatic adventures, but were there any in 3.5 other than Savage Tide? Because Savage Tide is in 3.5.
Yeah, no, not really. I pretty much own almost everything. I mean, there might have been some Dungeon Magazine adventures, I'm sure.
Well, Savage Tide is
that's likely true. I mean, Savage Tide is Dungeon Magazine.
And of course, you had the Storm Rack book.
Yeah.
Wait. So Savage Tide. So people don't know.
Storm Rack had adventure locations.
Let me just go through Savage Tide, because I actually know a lot of history of Savage Tide, because I talked to Eric about it a lot. And I have a friend of mine who finished it. I have a friend of mine, I almost had him on the show. He finished all 3 of the adventure paths in Dungeon Magazine, which is insane. Because I don't know. I finished 1, let alone all 3. And Savage Tide was the last adventure path. And in fact, they were going to cancel Dungeon Magazine before it was finished, and Eric Mona basically convinced the publisher, TSR or Wizards, don't cancel it. Let me at least finish the adventure path, and then you can do it in the last book. And they said yes. They actually kept it going just to finish Savage Tide. So thank Eric for that. But
it was was Shackled City,
Shackled City,
and then
Age of Worms,
Age of Worms,
then
then
Savage
Savage
Tide. Those were the 3.5
Mhm.
Paizo adventure paths
Yeah, and
that were officially published, licensed magazines with Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
So did Rise get published after those 3 got published, or was there some time?
Yes, Rise was published after that.
But that was published as a 3.5, but at the time, Pathfinder was the adventure series, not a game.
No. Pathfinder, the series existed after Savage Tide, after the cancellation.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, and Savage Tide is cool because you do fight Demogorgon, and it's not the fake
Demogorgon.
What's that?
Demogorgon.
Demogorgon.
Not Demo.
Demogorgon. I'm sick. Demogorgon, and the Demogorgon is the real Demogorgon. Like the insane stat block.
Okay. All right, Mark. Deep cut. Do you know the names of Demogorgon's 2 heads? It's 2 identities.
Oh my!
The name of Demogorgon's
God.
2 heads. Gosh, I definitely used to remember the names, but I am slightly blanking on the names of the 2 heads right now.
Yeah,
Do you remember them off the top of your head?
One is like Aemule, and the other one I think is like Hesradia or Hethradia or something like that.
That sounds right. Those sound like what I remember, especially the Hethradia one.
In my games, there were Mark and Derik. Those are the 2 names in my.
Those are the 2 heads of Demogorgon.
Yes.
Right.
Well, and then is the Derik head the one that says it's Demogorgon, not Demogorgon?
Yeah, he's the annoying one.
That's the thing, right? Like Demogorgon's actually like fighting against itself. Right?
Yeah, no, they always do.
Yeah.
The thing about this is why I look at these adventure paths. The people who wrote these adventure paths is ridiculous. That's why I wish we had him. We'll get him on again. We have James Jacob wrote the first one, which is great. Nicholas Longe, Richard Pett. By the way, probably my favorite adventure author of all time. Anything written by Richard Pett is insane and bizarre and weird. Then we have someone called Jason Bowman. I don't know who he is. And then we have Stephen S. Greer, who wrote the second one. We have Wesley Schneider and James L. Sutter wrote the 6th one. We have Tito Lidi wrote the 7th. Then we have the 8th one, which was written by, I got to get James on, Richard Pett and James Jacobs together wrote one adventure. Insane.
Usually when 2 people write an adventure, it means that like one of them does some of it and then the other one has to...
Shh, don't say that. I know why, because that's exactly what happened. Because Richard Pett, although he's a genius, is supposed to be a nightmare to work with because he's supposed to be very messy. So I have a feeling that's kind of what happened. But let's get James on to find out.
So Richard Pett is the Dave Arneson of of adventure writing,
maybe.
Right? Isn't that what they would say? That Dave had all the ideas, but he was like very disorganized and...
There's also Rob Schwab and Wolfgang Bauer and Greg Vaughn. There's
Wolfgang
a lot
Bauer
of classic...
and Greg A. Vaughn wrote the last
Wait. Are you saying that when you take veteran industry, designers and you put them all into a small team and they consistently are allowed to work on products that you generate amazing, incredible products and work? Wow, that's what it was.
And Eric Mona basically let them do whatever the hell they wanted because it was like, well, the Dungeon magazine is going bye-bye anyhow. Go crazy! Which they did, by the way, and they just did whatever the hell they wanted.
They definitely did. There is some out-of-pocket stuff in some of those adventures.
Totally.
Like it wouldn't fly. But I mean, I do think... I think all 3 of those are pretty much masterpieces. I mean, Shackled City can get a little bit
City, well, because Shackled City was
their first one. They were learning the format.
They designed it so that each adventure, keep this in mind, they wrote it so that each adventure could be run on its own without having to connect, and it really suffered from that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then when they happened is with the second one, when they did Age of Worms, I remember I was talking to Erica Mona about it. He didn't know if they would ever do it again because it was so hard and so much work. So he just went crazy. And he put like everything he can think of in that, which is why it has everything. Everything. And then Savage Tide, they're like, well, the magazine's being canceled. So
it's a swan song.
Then he's like, okay, well, that we're really going crazy. And that's why those adventures, man... When you got nothing to lose and you have the best people in the industry writing these things, Oh,
Well,
God, they're
I
so
also
good.
feel like, and you guys could disagree with me here, but
So
I also
good.
feel like there was an attitude still pervasive in that era that harkened back to the 90s and to the 80s, where like there's a certain mentality I think nowadays where it's like, I am making this adventure path so that you all get to experience this really cool story through the guise of your character in this game system that we're playing. But there's a part of me that feels like a lot of those adventures are like throwing down the gauntlet and being like, can you beat this? Like,
Oh, 100%.
this is fucking nightmare mode, challenge mode. If you want to get if you want to see the ending of this adventure, you got to know how to play, you know? And because there's encounters in there that are just brutal.
Age of Worms is considered one of the absolute toughest, nastiest, hardest adventures ever, and it is. I mean, it is super hard, that adventure.
I think the secret of third edition is that people were playing games that were so distinctly not even close to each other in power level that depending on where you wanted to publish your adventure, you could have an adventure that was trivially easy for optimizers while also brutally murdering almost any person who was like just starting playing the game. Because it was often the case that an optimizer could build a 10th level character in 3.5 that would easily beat a party of like 12, 20th level characters that were built by non-optimizers.
Right.
And then be able to keep doing that for every encounter of the day.
Right. But let's be honest. Let's be honest with ourselves. There is a not insignificant portion of the populace that really enjoyed that.
I'm not saying it's a problem. I am simply saying it's a reason why some of the adventures that tried to raise up even remotely towards what those optimizing characters would do, then gained a reputation of being brutal among groups that were not doing that. Because I've played some of these brutal adventures and they were not that brutal for a group of optimizers. But they were absolutely brutal for the baseline. And it's because the game was so different that you were not playing the same game. You would be closer to playing the same game as like baseline expected 3.5, playing like D&D second edition, than you were playing like optimized 3.5, even though the rules seemed very similar because they're the same book, just because the numbers are so different.
That also reminds me, Mark, we have another t-shirt idea that we're going to make. So you're going to have a graphic tee. And like, it won't be like, maybe it'll use like line art or stick art, you know, like stick people art, or like very, you know, kind of graphic art. And it's going to have like a bunch of people sitting around a table, clearly playing like D&D. And then there's like nothing on the table. And then there's sort of like a thought cloud floating above the table with everybody's little thought bubbles going into it. And in that thought cloud, you'll see like, you know, almost like one of those like 80s Tron, like 3D grids with the minis on it. And it'll say above the image, it'll say, grid based, and at the bottom it'll say grid based theater of the mind. So like we're gonna make a shirt to celebrate your style of play.
There we go. That all the Mark shirts.
Yes, Mark, you're just a merchandising dream.
I'm just a shirt origin. So the reason Savage Tie is on here is it's full of pirates and aquatic adventures. First part, there is no honor. It's all about pirates and undead pirates. And then you quickly get a ship that you're sailing around. There's like seaweed monsters and lost cities and shipwrecks and pirate fleets slumbering Aboleth City under the ocean. Like everything in here is very aquatic. It's a 12 adventure path for 3.5. Now, Derik, like you said, Stormrack is another good example of something that had adventure locations. It wasn't exactly an adventure. There's also LB2, Treasure of Chimera Cove, from the Pathfinder modules line, which used to have little letters. Little letters back when it was in 3.5. I'm keep considering this in 3.5 because this is when Pathfinder had modules that were not in the Pathfinder game system. Well, I mean, the Pathfinder adventure paths like Rise of the Rune Lords are still in 3.5 for a while before the first Pathfinder RPG adventure path, Council of Thieves. And there were also modules of which only Treasure of Chimera Cove, if I recall correctly, was like very aquatic. So Treasure of Chimera Cove is all about like a sleepy fishing village with a dangerous secret pirate complex that's down there. So it definitely fits into our theme. When you come to the Pathfinder RPG, it's got 2 adventure paths that are obviously pirate or aquatic. The Skull and Shackles adventure path, which is just famous for being just all pirates. Like you are press ganged into a pirate crew, and then you become pirates, and you have your own fleet of pirate ships, and you go underwater, you go pirating everywhere. Like that is the pirate adventure path for Pathfinder First Edition. The Ruins of Aslant adventure path for Pathfinder First Edition is about an undersea continent of Aslan that you explore into.
I don't even know that one.
Yeah, the Ruins of Aslan adventure path. It had a supplemental campaign setting book called Aquatic Adventures where is what my first cover credit on a print product is in there, because of the fact that I was asked by Adam Daigle to find all of the hidden aquatic rules throughout the core rulebook that are in different places and put them all in one place. And then write some like new rules and stuff. I created the apparatus of the octopus, which is
like an apparatus of Qualish, but
but it's an octopus one, so it's
so
actually
better.
not a D&D one. And so they're more able to use that. They were able to use that in like the adventure card game that was not OGL, so it couldn't use the apparatus of the crab. I was like, it's my octopus apparatus. It showed up on a card. So yeah, that's the second adventure path that's underwater, but there were a few Pathfinder First Edition modules that went into the water. There was From Shore to Sea is a famous one. That's kind of got the sort of stereotypical story about like villagers and a slumbering horror from a bygone age in some coastal village that is going to like, it's got a big like Kraken thing on the cover, but like Steven mentioned, it's one of those many just the Kraken tentacles attack you, or maybe that was you, Derik, who was mentioning that
it's just tentacles. Yeah.
Yeah, it has one of those you're attacked by the Kraken tentacles situations. And I remember that module in particular because our group was running it just because the GM wanted to see if this one particular like very high damage sorcerer damaging build based on cold damage could solo it when it had very high cold resistance on the creatures. Solo it with like 2 expert, the NPC class NPCs just hanging around to be meat shields. And so we went to run it at his apartment, and that is when we were running it, the Boston Marathon like bombing happened, and all of we were in Somerville, and all of the T shut down, and so one of our friends just was stuck at the GM's house, and she couldn't get back. And we were just like, well, I guess we'll finish From Shore to Sea in one session, and so we did. There's also another one that was much later in Pathfinder First Edition than From Shore to Sea that was called Ire of the Storm by Thurston Hillman. And in that one, there's just a lot of things coming from a heretical cult of Gozra, the deity of the storm, like the storm and the sea. And it's like in the area near Sargava, which has since that time become the nation of Vidrian. So there's a lot of Pathfinder aquatic adventures. If anything, I think Pathfinder may have had a higher density of aquatic adventures than almost in First Edition than almost any of these other systems or publishers that we were talking about here. I guess all the publishers were wotc and TSR.
They had a ton because they also their world is on water, so they always were on water. Like that was a constant theme because I ran so many of the adventure paths, and I remember dealing with water constantly. So
yeah, I'm not even gonna bring up all the one-off from the adventure paths like you were saying, Steven. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can say that off the top of my head, Shattered Star Book 6 is in an underwater city. That some of it comes above the water after a tsunami, but Yeah, there's lots of aquatic adventuring in Pathfinder 1. It's probably one of the richest places to find adventures that match this theme.
Yeah, for sure. Because, that's a good segue, because 4th edition, not really too much. The core, quote unquote, core adventure path, the Orcus adventure path from 4th edition. There's no naval, there's no boats in any of those adventures. And even some of the handful of other supplements that they released, not so much. They never really released a Storm Rack type book for that. Like I said, they did have stats for the Kraken. It's 4th edition, of course, D&D, I should say. So they did. There was even an astral Kraken for your epic level characters who it's a Kraken of the astral plane. The closest that I could think of in terms of Krakens is this book. This is not really an adventure. It's called Vorberkoth, and this was a very small product, very thin book, and it's basically just a bunch of adventure ideas about this ancient, ruined, flooded tiefling city called Vorberkoth. And part of what they have in here, which I think is really interesting, is this idea that a Kraken lives like in the dark underbelly of the city, and kind of taking advantage of 4th edition's rules. And you can really feel the gamification here. There is a monster in this book called the Kraken Tentacle, and it is a minion. So it has 1 hit point, and the idea is that like when you are like fighting throughout like this city, occasionally the Kraken's tentacles will come up and try to get you, or maybe it'll reinforce another fight. But in terms of like the simulationism, it's nothing, because it's a 1 hit point minion that is literally just the Kraken's tentacle. It's not like it's like in the fiction, it is connected back to the Kraken, whose literal tendrils are spread throughout the underbelly of this underwater city. But in game mechanical terms, it is a 1 hit point minion that moves around, It's really kind of an interesting perspective on it. But to my knowledge, I don't think we ever fought a Kraken in 4th edition. I don't recall there being a lot of naval things. Like my party got a ship, but it was a Spelljammer. It was like an astral ship that they used to fly to different planes and skim the seas of the Feywild and the Shadow Dark. I don't recall there being a Shadow Gloom Shadow. What the hell is my evil?
It's not the Shadow Dark. It's the
Shadowfell.
Shadowfell, yes.
Listen, the Mad Libs RPG weird plane generator, like if I wanted to make a Kickstarter and I'm like, I'm going to make an OSR game, and it's just like you have a random table of like, Shadow, Gloom, Dark, Night, and you just roll on the first table, and then you roll on the second table, and you're like, oh, this is Gloomdelve, a thrilling adventure that gets rid of all of the horribleness of modern D&D, but is exactly D&D, so that you're not scared.
DC 21,
which by the way finished yesterday, 2-point-something million. So, Stephen, you were correct. You were exactly correct. I think we're gonna. Someone sent me like a copy of the rules, so we might take a look at them.
DC. So that was the joke. Is that you could probably tell it better than me, Derik.
The joke was, we were talking about the industry and stuff like that with people around, and we were talking about. I had made this joke a while ago about people talking about the action economy of Pathfinder 2nd edition. Being like, our action economy, it's so much better. It's a 3 action economy, and I was like, well, 4th edition kind of had 3 actions, but I get where they're going with it. And I was like, oh, but how long is it going to be before someone's like, oh, 3 actions? We have 4 actions, and then it's like. That's exactly what DC 20 did. Like their whole shtick is we have 4 actions. So
then we were joking. It was me and you and Bob in the car when we were having this discussion.
And so like we started joking about like, well then we'll just come out with a game that has 5 actions, and then we'll come out with a game that has 6 actions. I said, I'll put a pledge in the Kickstarter that says, I guarantee you our game, you will always get the most actions. I go, if somebody else makes more actions, I will release a patch, a hot fix that will up the number of actions in this game.
Wouldn't it be funnier if you had a stretch goal that up the number of actions?
That's what it was. We were going to do that, yes. We're going to just keep having more actions. But then my idea was DC 21. You start at level 21.
Right.
And what was the tagline?
Oh well, no. So you said DC. You were like DC 21. You know, it's one better, and you're like, you know, you start at level 20 at the end of the game. And I said, no. You don't start at level 20. You start at level 21.
Right.
I go DC 21, a level above.
So,
Wouldn't it be funny if you started at level 21, but you
And
had
worked
to,
back backwards.
no, that was the
you've
whole
already
joke.
killed
You were-
all the demon lords, and now you just have to like try to live your life afterwards. But you're level 21.
No,
Right.
that was it. It would go from level to it would DC 21. He goes from level 21 to level 40. But in reality, it's the exact same rules as everything else. It's just you're only level 1. It's just called level 21. So so from now on, I'm going to add 20 to all my character levels. So my friends, even though they're level 17, I'm going to tell them, you know what? You're level 37
Right.
now. And the monsters you're fighting, they're level 39.
People do like it when the numbers go burr. So, but yeah,
Some
so
people prefer it if the numbers are lower because it's easier to deal with, though.
there's a sweet spot because because then you lose granularity, and like if you give a bonus, it's massive because a +1 is just a massive number.
That's
like
our
there's
next Kickstarter. DC 21, a level above.
a level above.
There you go.
Challenge everything. Anyways,
So
yeah, that
fourth edition didn't have almost any then.
Yeah, no, not really. And they definitely didn't feel like they had an emphasis on that. You know, underwater adventures didn't look good in Wayne Reynolds art. You know, so like it was like, you know, you had to have like the characters leaping off of buildings and looking like badasses. And also, I think, quite frankly, to some of the stuff we talked about before, fourth edition, by and large, was trying to create a sort of balanced combat as sport type mentality. And the idea that like the GM could throw this massive curveball at you, like suddenly you're underwater and a lot of your stuff doesn't work, didn't really vibe with the theme of that game as much.
That's fair.
So I would say, if anything, because if we look at something like water breathing in fourth edition, it was a ritual, which meant that it didn't take up any of your powers or what we would call today spell slots. Instead, you just spent a couple $100 and you cast this ritual, and you could select up to 8 people who can potentially breathe water for 24 hours. So it was kind of like a very simple binary. Do you have this? Cast it. Okay, you're good. You know, and like, let's move on to the adventure. And yeah, we'll pretend that we're underwater, but you know, yeah, you know, it's fine, you know.
There you go. So, fifth edition did have, even though they don't have a ton of adventures compared to some of the other ones that we were talking about from before, they did have an aquatic adventure, although it's mostly updating aquatic adventures from classic past, and that is Ghosts of Saltmarsh, the anthology that includes updated versions of Sinister's Secret of Saltmarsh, Danger Dumbwater, Final Enemy, as well as several others as well. Salvage Operation, Isle of the Abbey, Tamarod's Fate, and The Styes. So,
Did you say ghosts or goats? I heard goats. The goats?
Ghosts. The ghosts.
The goats.
Not a
of
goat.
Saltmarsh.
Of Saltmarsh, but a ghost.
That would be a much more fun adventure.
And
I'm
it's sort of a whole campaign. It's not where you can play it from 1st through 12th.
I'm also going to be that guy, and I'm actually going to compliment 5th edition a little bit, but I'm also going to complain a little bit. Okay, so if we look at this cover, okay, we can see that there is a band of adventurers on a small one-masted vessel that you would probably call a skiff or maybe a sloop. And in the background, we can see that there's a larger vessel that is being sort of attacked by the tentacles, but it itself is a one-masted vessel, although it does have a foresail. And this would have been called a cog or a carvel, which was a medieval trading ship. I see this thing in games that are purporting to be medieval, and they'll have these massive, like, 5-deck ships with 6. Those did not exist until like the Age of Sail. And like, now I understand, obviously there are certain worlds, like Galarian's a world, for example, which the technology is kind of more Renaissance era. And so there's maybe a little bit more of an appropriateness. But if you're playing like a dyed-in-the-wool, fantasy D&D campaign, like they did not have these massive, huge ships. They were still fairly small.
You're arguing that the ships are incorrect, but magic is fine.
Yeah. Well, how does magic help you make a better ship?
Hey, it's magic. Anything can help with anything.
Well, then why is there disease and hunger in D&D worlds?
Hey, there isn't if you can afford the cures.
Like, if you're a good aligned cleric, why do you not just spend, and you're higher level, why don't you just spend every single day just maxing out your spell slots and like going around and like healing the sick and curing?
They run out.
And your dad died in a farming accident. Okay, I'll resurrect him. I'll resurrect him.
They run out.
And then you just get 25 more slots tomorrow.
Can you afford the money to resurrect people?
Fine.
The food you can do. The food you can definitely do. You can feed.
Mark, how can you put a cost on someone's life? You should definitely sell all of your multi-million GP gear and resurrect these people.
But you wouldn't have multi-million GP gear.
And you'd only be casting like 2 spells a day because you'd be first level the whole time because you're never doing anything.
Well, no. I'm saying after you reach a certain power level, or like when you're having downtime and like if your cleric says, I want to go retrain, you're like, I think you should probably just be walking around healing the sick. There's plenty of high-level NPC clerics who are sitting around in these towns being very selfish.
Yeah, you're right. But you know what? They do that. But the problem is people keep getting sick.
No, they don't. They charge for it. In every D&D adventure I've ever seen, there was like 500 gold for a neutralized poison. It's like, it costs you nothing. It's just literally, you're a god. You worship the god of healing. Why are you charging for this?
They charge for spellcasting services so that they can run their facilities.
You know what?
And so that they can give it for free to some people who can't pay.
But it costs nothing.
You would like my games, Derik, because we call that the hand wave heal in my games.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fair.
You see, in my games, I only have that really occurring during combat when it matters. After combat, everyone says, can we do the hand wave heal? And I go, yes. And we hand wave it, and I say, you spend 30 minutes and you're all healed. And that's it. That's how healing works in all my games. So, and if they have disease is a little different. Diseases might take a day or two, but, or if they have things, poisons. But otherwise, hand wave heal every game. Because it's good. It's something that only affects in my games during combat. And after combat, you're fine. Everyone's fine. Everyone's living.
Right.
So yeah.
5e, I think that Ghost of Saltmarsh is the main one. Obviously, there's tons of stuff on DM's Guild. But in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, they did not do another big aquatic adventure path, probably in part because there were so many in Pathfinder 1st Edition.
Except for Jules
but I say they didn't do it. Steven did.
I did.
And me. But and
you can get this now.
Let's talk about Joel the Indigo
off.
Isles a little bit more.
25% off. 25% off.
Get your copy today. It is the thickness.
It's really
good.
It
was a niche to fill in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and Steven has fulfilled that niche in a way that I feel follows the advice we've mentioned earlier in this episode for underwater adventures, which is they are a spice. They are interesting when they're used rarely, but if you're just constantly doing it, it can actually drag the morale of the group and be a bit of a slog for the PCs.
You go underwater too, and in fact, there's one of the coolest cities I've ever seen that Mark wrote. Basically, I'll give you the secret. We needed to fill some space.
We didn't actually need to fill the space.
I didn't need to fill the space.
The fact that it got big is because Steven said that we should write it, and then at the point where we added anything, we needed to fill 2 pages. But we were fine without that city.
Well, no,
Steven was like, people might choose to go to this settlement that's vaguely mentioned.
Okay, there's an entire ancestry of sea-based creatures in the game that Mark wrote, the Kokori, and they are cool as hell. And there's a lot of where they talk about their homeland.
You meet a warband and they tell you where they're originally from. And
right.
Steven said, let's do a settlement stat block for that.
Well,
and once we added it, then we needed a whole 2 pages on it.
On top of but the point is that when you're in an adventure and you need to restock, there was a part where they were going between several levels and they didn't have anywhere to restock. And I realized, this is a real problem because this adventure happens very quickly. It's only over a couple of days, so they can't even craft. And crafting rules suck. So I was like, okay, we got to put I got to put a town so they can just. You need to have restocking. And it was killing a lot of birds with one stone. One, you did something cool. You go to a town that's underwater. Two, you get to see more of the lore of the Kotori, which Mark wrote. And three, it was a freaking cool underwater city, man. It was really cool. I love that.
You can see when Derik showed the thickness, there was no need to fill any space. But it was killing 3 birds with like about 100 stones that we threw at them.
It did a lot.
One of which was the Jared Blendo map that wound up delaying the entire adventure by a while because Jared Blendo didn't know he needed to make the map of that town until later on.
He made an underwater.
It was such a good map.
It was such a good map.
It was really, really good.
Yeah.
But it was also added on to his other maps.
Yeah, but he made it too because it looks like it's all based on like coral and under. Oh, it's awesome. And
it's very, very good.
It's really cool. I kind of sort of based it when I was talking to Mark. I don't know if you remember this. One of my favorite episodes of BoJack Horseman. It's actually it's a beautiful episode. The episode of BoJack Horseman where. So in BoJack Horseman, the world of BoJack, animals are people, and some are fish. And they go to a city that's underwater, and the entire episode takes place underwater with no voiceover, because they're underwater, and it's all done like with mimes and music and sound.
Wasn't it just because he didn't turn on the voice?
Yes, that's the joke at the end. It's like, oh, didn't she know you could just press this button to talk? And he's like, God damn it! And he's like cursing at the end. But you saw that one. It's very funny, but it's a beautiful episode because the whole thing is done like almost soundless. And but I liked how everything was different because it was underwater. So there you go.
So, yeah. In terms of Duel of the Indigo Isles, it's not entirely aquatic. It's got bits that are underwater, like we said. That section with the underwater city is also similar to the section. It's very close to the section Steven talked about where you fight underwater and there are pockets of air and things like that. Most of the second book takes place on a boat that takes you to different islands. You go underwater. There's pirates, and in general, it's very similar, I would say, to an adventure like Savage Tide, or Skull and Shackles, in the sense that it's not underwater all the time. It goes underwater sometimes, but it's like kind of on the water or on an island for the rest of those times.
I'll tell you, the one time it does go heavy underwater is that it's actually based on a Bungie video game. I base everything on other things, and it's loosely based on Pathways into Darkness, which was it's the game they did after Minotaur. It's like their second game ever, and I basically based it off that. So, and yeah, that's a heavy spoiler though, because that's way later. But there's a lot of water. There's basically that's the other thing, as we do a little bit of everything, because there's a little bit of pirates, a little bit of jungle adventure, a little bit of cave exploration, a little bit of horror weirdness. There's a little bit of underwater. We mix it up. Like you're in the desert, like it's just all over the place, because I never want people to get too comfortable, and I always find that those are the best, most interesting adventure paths that I run, is where it's always mixing it up, because just when they're getting comfortable, it's like, yep, here we go, we got to mix it up, and they're like, okay, and it keeps them on their toes, and it never keeps anything stale. So, and the thing is also, they don't go underwater till they're pretty powerful, because you definitely need some spells, and you don't get those spells till later. So that's the other thing. It's like, you can't really do underwater adventures at like level 1 or level 2. I mean, you could, but it's going to be kind of hard. But
it's going to be super rough. That's like what I was talking to Derik about, where you may want to just universally increase the difficulty if the PCs are stuck there, holding their breath. They have a limited number of rounds. They're just like, they don't have any preparations. And these enemies are just like, I am in my element.
And the thing is, though, you never really get to fight Krakens. I'm thinking of it, because they're like level 19, 20.
They're Kraken cultists. There's Kraken like worshippers. There's tentacles. There's mini Krakens. so many adventures use that just fight the tentacle aspect of it. But
Oh, yeah.
since Krakens are level 18, it's not easy to fight them because you need to get to that really high level, and then your plot line needs to be somewhere where a gargantuan squid creature can fit at that level.
Well, and that's why I thought that the 4th edition approach was so interesting, because it basically took the monster and being like, yeah, you can go fight the level 20 Kraken. Ooh, it's scary. But like, before you ever fight that, here is literally these monsters that are just its tentacles. Because, like, you know, in D&D terms, when the Kraken attacks you in your ship and your tentacles and you're fighting off the tentacles, you might go to yourself, wait, isn't this creature like that it's attached to, like, that's like 40 feet below the boat, like 18th level? Shouldn't this thing just kill us all instantly? Like, there could be
Final Fantasy. That's like you're just fighting the tentacles, you know. Like,
yeah. Well, but again, I mean, there is a strong trope to that that I think is really cool. I mean, one of my favorite fights from Final Fantasy IV, aka Final Fantasy II, is when you are going to Damsayan or something like that, or whatever, and you meet Tella and you have Rydia in your party, and you're going through the waterways, and then you fight the Octoman, and he's got the tentacles that come up, and you have to kill the tentacles off before killing like the main monster. There's a fun kind of trope to that. That I don't know that as many games have leaned into, but it is kind of fun.
So, as an aside, and a
Watcher
weird,
in the Water was kind of a Kraken.
Weird coincidence. There's a few things. First, don't forget, if you go to was it pre-sale, pre-order, or it's Kickstarter.rollforcombat.com. You can get your Kraken Locket when you get Battlezoo Bestiary, Elemental Storm, but weird coincidence that Mark and I were already planning on doing the Kraken Ancestry next year. You will be able to. This sounds like something Derik would love. You can play a Kraken character.
You can see it in the videos. Go down below. If you're in this video section of the channel page, you see the live videos. So you have to go from live to videos. And the most recent one on videos as of this publication of this live is a video of Linda, who's going to be the author for Kraken, and me, and we're just doing the brainstorm live at the time, although it was then recorded in a video, of the early aspects of that ancestry. So Steven, I have a question for you, because somebody asked this on the Roll for Combat Discord. Is it okay if we tell people what product the Kraken Ancestry is going to be in, or should we still play coy and they only know Kraken Ancestry is going to come out in July?
Something. Yeah, not yet. I'm not going to say what the next year is.
So it's year of something, and we can't reveal it. That's what I thought. Yes. They asked me, and I said I'm going to ask Steven.
Not yet, but we do
if he wants, but if he doesn't, I'm not going to.
Hey, man,
I'm not going to spoil.
I got the art's done, and so is the background, and so is the logo. They saw the cover. I mean, I think that's a lot right there. You got a whole Kraken Ancestry. So
yeah.
And how is it going to be a level 1 Kraken? I don't know. I guess it'll be a B. Hey, man, Kraken's got to start off tiny, right?
Yeah, it's like a baby Kraken that's probably only large instead of gargantuan.
Yeah,
something like that.
I cannot stress to you how much I will never play that.
Oh, you are. You're gonna be playing.
Derek, there are things that are going to be in that set that you're going to dislike even more, but there are actually some that you might like better than the average of some of the Gear of X things.
It could be called.
There are some wacky ones that are very wacky, but there are also some that are not as wacky.
Yeah, there's things like the you know what? It's almost a year of weird. That's not what it's called, but it's close because we have a lot of weird stuff.
It's a mix.
You want to see how crazy this is?
Uh-huh.
Out of all the, and I don't know them all like by the back of my hand, but of all the weird ancestries that you guys have released,
yes,
guess which one I would be the most likely to play.
Of all the weird ones that we released,
yes,
which one would you be most likely to play?
Yep. Like in a real game, not like, oh, for fun.
I'm going to say dungeon, because its avatar could be a human or elf, and then you would look like a human or elf.
I forgot the dungeon. It was a real one that it got made.
I think you already told me
this. It was real all along. It was never a joke.
It's either doppelganger or mimic.
Okay. Mark is the closest.
Oh, okay.
Intelligent item.
Oh
Okay.
well, yeah. That a lot of people.
I actually
like
think that would be pretty cool. Like, I actually would have no problem being like a wizard that is the warrior sword, or or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's actually kind of a cool concept. But that is the one that I would be the most likely to play.
Now the Kraken, by the way, could totally, because the world's heaviest, largest bonefish, which is, by the way, you should look this thing up. It's the sunfish. It weighs 2
I've seen
tons,
those.
2.5 tons. I saw it in the ocean. I actually saw one. They're made out of bone, and they're so heavy. Like, they were like, how do they float? And there's this whole complex system of how they move up and down, and they're bizarre, and they're enormous, and they look bizarre as heck. But as babies, they're like the size of your pinky nail. Like, that's how tiny they start off with. So it's always these things that are the biggest that start off the smallest. So you could be a baby Kraken, and a baby Kraken would be around the size of an adventurer. So
A younger Kraken could easily be regular large size and grow up to be gargantuan. And we can have in rules for, we probably would not include ancestry feats to go to gargantuan because they just don't do it in ancestry feats. But if we ever compiled it later and did an archetype or something like that, it might. Because that's what we like, the dragon, right? You could get the gargantuan, but you need an 18th level class feat to pull that off.
Also, if you're looking up sunfish pictures on Google to see what these things are, if you just type in sailboat after sunfish, you'll also see the first sailboat I ever sailed and learned to sail on,
what?
which is called a sunfish.
Oh, the sunfish. I used to. Everyone did the sunfish. I did the sunfish in camp. That's like everyone. Yeah, everyone did the sunfish.
Yeah.
Yeah. The biggest species of fish that's not a shark, and that is those things. I saw it. They're so weird too. I saw it in the ocean, and it was like it was on its side. It was just sort of like, it wasn't dead. It was just sort of hanging. I was like, man, that thing is weird. But they're made out of bone, so you can't even eat them. And they just look prehistoric. They're the weirdest looking fish ever. Like, they're insane. And look up their biology, because they don't act like they're their own thing. Like, they could be a monster in D&D. They're just so freaking weird. But they're very peaceful.
In that case, I'm surprised you guys haven't already done it.
Well, maybe that'll be the next thing you can be. You could be a bonefish. There you go. Sunfish. Sorry, sunfish. Well, we'll get there. Eventually, we're gonna have. I think our April Fools one year will be the Derik, where it's just some grumpy, disheveled game master who quotes. You know what it could be called? It could be the rules lawyer, aka the Derik.
I'm not a rules lawyer.
Oh, you're not a rules lawyer.
You played with me again.
No, you're not the rules lawyer. No,
you should know that I am the
What's
farthest.
the opposite of a rules lawyer? The purist? Would that be it? No,
I don't even know.
I don't even know what I would call you.
Yeah.
But it would be someone who is like. It's kind of like
I defy easy definitions.
You defy. I am Derik. I defy definition. I am one. I am the alpha and the omega. I am one.
Yeah,
I'm the only one. But well, we're gonna go soon. Do you have racquetball tonight?
Oh no. I canceled. I agreed to come on the show, but it has been a recovery and a half over the last couple of days from this cold. So, or flu or COVID or whatever it was.
Yeah,
but
it's funny. I used to get con crud. Then I stopped. I didn't. But this time. See, it was a week after, so I can't tell if it was con crud or just it could have been just life crud.
Right. That's the thing that it's very strange, but you know, it is what it is. But yeah, I did get like I said, I did get my Gen Con badge, and I'm like, oh, what a waste.
I can't even believe it's so soon. It's weird when it starts in July, because like when it starts.
Even though it is like July 31st or something, like it's
in 4 weeks. It's like we just did Origins, and now we're gonna go to another one. It's almost too much. It's like it's. I mean, it's a very good. Yeah, you know, I'm not on your side yet, but I can kind of see where you're coming from, because it is a lot. It is a lot.
It's a lot.
Well, I used to look forward to it more because I only went to Gen Con. I didn't go to Origins.
Well, the other thing too is like, and again, I don't want to Gen Con bitching, but like when we were in Columbus. Now, don't get me wrong, Origins is, you know, a third of the size of Gen Con, right?
Sure.
I mean, and certainly, you know, major publishers are not there, you know. But I mean, because they're so short, because they're so close together, like when you're at Gen Con, really pay attention to how the feel of being in the con hall is compared to Origins and Gen Con.
I don't have to. I know.
Like just being able to like actually talk to the people at the booths, being able to talk to the people who are next to you, being able to actually like move down an aisle at a normal walking pace, like these things are not going to be possible at Gen Con.
Except for one small problem. I also talked to the people at the booths, and they made significantly less money. And
of course they do.
They make
but also, I mean, a booth at Gen Con is probably $25,000 or something insane.
That's a booth at Gen Con and Origins is almost the same. In fact,
crazy.
they're like, people are upset a little because the Origins booths were pretty expensive, and there was a lot of people who were not there because they feel it's not even worth it.
Sure. And I get it. I mean, like, I'm not trying to, like, I do think that Gen Con has a lot of things going for it, but the main thing is this, and this is a huge deal for me. And I understand that's not a huge deal for everybody. Like, Gen Con is more, or Origins is more than just the game convention. And I had patrons that went, you played some games with some of them, Stephen, that they were basically signed up for games from sun up to sundown, right? Like they go there and like, they just go, demo, play, demo, play. That's not me. It's a vacation for me. It's a convention. It's supposed to be like, I'm not going there for work, theoretically. It's supposed to be for fun. I like being able to do things like, hey, Derik, you want to get lunch? Sure. What are you thinking? I don't know. Let's go over to North Market. You and I walk over to North Market. We immediately get food within 5 minutes. We immediately have a place to sit down. No one's bothered. We're there for an hour. We're just eating our lunch. It's super easy. At Gen Con, like the mall food court is shut down. Like almost all of the food options down. You have the trucks, which in theory should help. But I don't know about you, but last year I had to sometimes wait 35, 40 minutes in the sun for one of those trucks.
I never go to the trucks, by the way.
Yeah, the trucks used to be the winning play. Now it's the losing play. But I don't know where you're supposed to eat.
There's a big problem, Gen Con. The biggest problem with Gen Con is there is nowhere to eat. What I often will do, I do a trick, is you do Subway and you get the footlong or two, and then carry them along with you.
Yeah, but I don't want to pack rations for my vacation.
Oh, you got to pack rations when you go to Gen Con. You totally do. The food court is not closed. I do go to the food court a lot.
But I mean, it's significantly shut down from what it used to be.
Oh, there we go. Someone does mention that Derik got recognized before I did. There you go. Yeah. It's not that I got recognized. He publicly got recognized. Privately, people were giving me the nod. Yeah, there we go.
That's why you need the official Roll for Combat shirt that says I do work with Mark Seifter.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna say it's gonna be on the front and it's gonna say yes, I do work with Mark Seifter, and on the back it's gonna say, and I know Derik Melinda.
Yeah, and then that's why no one will ever come up and talk to you.
Actually, if I was really smart, in the front it would say, yes, I do know Ginny D, and on the back it would say, and Professor Dungeon Master.
Right.
And then everyone would come up and talk to me.
Yeah. Also, that was a very, very sobering news there from the professor, and I can't believe he's going to Gen Con like so soon after his health issue.
Yeah. I knew about it when it happened. I've been talking quite a bit.
Yeah, but I mean, great for him, obviously. But a great way to turn what was, I'm sure, very difficult for him. I really like that he basically turned it into a PSA.
Yep.
For his channel. I love that you point out the demographics. He goes, most of the people watching this are 40 and 50-year-old men. And he's like, get your prostates checked. I thought that was pretty cool. But I was actually happy for him that he said he's going to be going to Gen Con, because I know last year he went to Origins and I didn't think he was there.
No, he didn't go to Origins last year.
Yeah, he did.
Nope.
Or 2 years ago.
Yeah, he went like 2 years ago. He's basically he's retiring from teaching in 1 year. And once he retires from teaching, he's going to be going to every single con with us. So that's like his whole plan. It's like he's going to be retiring and he's going to be going to con after con after con after con. In fact, you're going to be sick of seeing him, from what I hear. He and I talk. He's very much looking forward to it. Otherwise, right now...
Well, you and everybody else is really trying to push me to go to PAX Unplugged, so...
I was about to say that he's going to be at PAX because it's right next to us. I mean, he and I live like in 2 hours, an hour from it. So it's an excellent convention. It's really gotten good. And food options, Oh my God, is the food good at PAX? Oh, it's so good because there's a huge food. Food is not a problem at PAX, and everyone's
You mean
there.
you don't like paying $20 for Con Hall pizza chicken tenders?
Nothing is more fun. No, and they have this market next to, it's like I forget what it's called, Reading Market. That's it, Reading Market. And there's just regular restaurants because it's Philly. But Reading Market is like one of those old school, like a real. It's kind of like one we went to at Origins, but like way more dense and way more variety of food, and it's really good. It can get a little crowded, but they know how to handle it because this is all these people do. So the lines move very quick. Like there are lines, but they move. So it's really good, the food there. Anyhow, you should definitely go. But we should go because I actually have more work after this that I have to deal with. So
Yes. Well, I am looking forward to returning to my convalescence.
are you
And
doing anything for the 4th, either of you?
no. My sister is like, she's like, yeah, she's like, I don't feel like making anything, cooking out or anything like that. She's like, we're probably not even gonna go to the fireworks. So I was like, all right, well, I mean, I don't go to the fireworks anyways, but no, I'll probably just hang out at home and we're still just kind of rest, relax, maybe read some. And Friday we kind of have like a semi-official, unofficial day off from work. So basically, I've started my weekend. So
Yeah. Well, right now, yeah, I'm a little sick, so I'm probably gonna do nothing, I think. There were fireworks last night, but I couldn't go because I was sick, and I just hung out with the dogs instead. So
yeah,
and,
I like my dogs.
well, one of my dogs is, although she seems to be doing a little better. She has brain cancer. So
Right, you were telling us at Origins. So
yeah,
I gotta go to the ortho surgeon next Monday for consult to see if my dog needs another ACL surgery.
Yeah. Well, my dog was going in for her second. That's when they discovered this.
And this would be his second. So
Yeah.
But
well, but she's
it's my
okay.
son. That's my son.
Yeah. That's my daughter. My other daughter.
So yeah. Anyways, cool stuff. Nice last call. We're actually going to do a stream tomorrow, but we're going to do it like early in the day. We're going to do it for our EU friends. Nothing like celebrating America by doing an EU friendly stream. But obviously a lot of people are going to have the day off and they're going to be busy in the evening. So we're going to do our stream earlier in the day. So look for us over there or not, and just say, who the hell is that guy? I don't like him anyways. And that's fine too.
Everyone hates Derik.
I mean,
except for the people who love you.
I have ultimate cosmic power, itty little bitty subs count.
That's a good one. That should be on the t-shirt. Knights of Last Call.
Yeah. I was saying something. I was like, don't confuse people's sub count with how good their ideas are. I was like, there's plenty of very, very successful and famous game designers and stuff like that. I think like Ed Greenwood has like a few thousand subs, like
yeah.
Guy's the guy.
Wait, what time is your stream tomorrow? People are asking.
Probably noon Eastern.
Noon Eastern. Wow, you're really going for it.
Well, I have the day off, so I mean, I'll probably get up. And normally I get up and I'm ready, by 9 o'clock, 9:30, and then I have a stand up at 10, and but all that's canceled. So
all right.
So
and then we're gonna
be there, and we got some other things to do. We're gonna do another. We got a tip goal, so we're gonna be doing a deep dive into the history of the wizard class. We're gonna be doing a deep dive into the history of the cleric class over the course of RPG D&D / D20 history. And
you're really going for it.
Well, we've already done the other ones. The only ones we have left to do are ranger, cleric, and wizard. So
there you go.
So we already did the other ones. Didn't you ever read that? Like, didn't you ever see those streams? My druid one was called "The Right to Bear Arms."
I don't get it.
Because you turn your arms into
a bear. I don't get it. Explain it to me.
A good class is Bard to Find.
I don't get it. What's that about? Is that about the monk?
I'm smitten with the paladin.
Isn't that I'm smiting with the paladin?
Well, smitten.
You can't do that anymore. Everyone's angry.
The fighter one was just called.
They broke smite.
Gone Rogue.
I don't get it. Is that for the fighter?
No, the fighter one was just called Fighter's Gonna Fight.
Oh, okay.
That one,
Fighters probably are gonna fight.
Fighter's gonna fight.
Fighter's Gonna Fight.
No, it should have just been enough talk.
Yeah, that actually would have been. That would
have been a good one.
By the way, I found a great clip of Enough Talk. Obviously the classic one is Conan the Destroyer,
right,
and he throws a dagger. But somehow randomly YouTube recommended this to me, and I forgot this movie. I was obsessed with this movie when I was young Derik, like 5-year-old Derik. Masters of the Universe film, 1980s, Dolph Lundgren, right? And in the final scene where He-Man confronts Skeletor,
yes,
they have this like little witty
yes,
banter,
yes,
and Skeletor goes like, "I'm going to erase your memory from the universe," and then Dolph Lundgren goes, "Enough talk," and I was like, yes, what a great.
Well, on top of that, all right, I'm going to one up you on this. Is that on Masters of the Universe, the ending was literally just them kind of talking, and it did so poorly in test screenings that they went back and reshot that fight. And that's why it just goes, enough talk. It actually was added later because that fight, it was all added later. It was just it didn't.
It's not much of a fight, but
right, and it's not much of a fight because they just had to add. It literally was. They didn't end with a fight. Like the show, it just ended. And so they're like, you can't just end it like that. I think they ran out of money.
Sure.
There was a lot of budget issues with that, and then so they just they got more money to add the fight.
I'm not defending the film, okay?
Oh, that movie is.
But 5-year-old Derik, who owned both Castle Grayskull and whatever the hell Skeletor's evil
Snake Mountain.
Snake Mountain.
It was originally rolled over by King Hiss and his other snake people before Skeletor took it over.
Wow, Mark to the rescue. Mark, and you do know something about lore of 80s, 90s films.
But I thought it was made.
No, I don't know anything about the lore of the film. I really didn't like the film. But when I was really, really, really little, I watched the cartoon series with like the moral lessons that they teach you at the end of it about because so that they could get it past like the censors back then.
Right. But also a couple key points. That movie, Master of the Universe, stars a very young Robert Duncan McNeil, who would go on, of course, to be Lieutenant Tom Paris.
That's correct.
It includes the first film appearance of one gorgeous, beautiful Courtney Cox.
That's correct.
As Julie.
Correct.
It has Dolph Lundgren, obviously, and then what's his name played Skeletor?
Frank Langella.
Frank Langella, which is crazy. He doesn't even look like it, but apparently he did it because his kids. Like, if you want to see somebody
wanted him to do it,
if you want to see what going over the top it's over the top, but in a non-cringy way.
He loved it.
You got to watch Frank Langella's performance of Skeletor in Master of the Universe. Like, all GMs should watch that, and that's the energy that you should bring, because look, we're being silly. We're playing with children's toys. Like, we get it, okay? And he knows that, but that doesn't mean you can't just like eat up the scenery. And he did such a good job with that.
Or you could just do the cartoon Skeletor. Curse you, He-Man!
I just remember. I feel like I had. Or maybe that was actually Skull Mountain. Whenever I think of Skeletor, I'm imagining like the action figure having like a removable jaw, but it might have been Snake Mountain, the play set.
I think it did have a mouth of a weird creature that you could like sort of go into, and then the snake that was twining around Snake Mountain is on sort of the left side of the play set.
So Kyle is absolutely correct, because the only thing that comes close to this is Raul Julia as M. Bison,
who did it because his kids wanted, and he was dying.
And he was dying, and he's like, this is a final thing I can do for my kids. They love this game, and he just sold that. Everyone else in that movie was like, what the hell are we doing here? But he was so committed to the role.
For me, it was Tuesday.
That's the best line. He goes, to you, that was the most important day of your life where M. Bison graced your village. To me, it was a Tuesday.
The best part is, while he's learning that he killed Chun-Li's family, he's also trying to hit on her and pick her up.
No, he is. God, he was such a good actor. Like that movie.
I mean, again, I have an uncle who passed many years ago, but he and I like hung out all the time in the 90s because he had a Sega Genesis and it was like awesome, and he was like the cool young uncle, and he and I both loved the Addams Family, especially the newer films that came out in the 90s.
Those were
and
so
both
good.
Adam's Family and Adam's Family Values, and Raul Julia was just so good in all of those. I really liked him. I always thought he was great in everything he did. So, anyways, random way to end the stream, right?
It is a random way to end the stream. Except
We've got
I'll
to
give you
stop
other.
now because we have something to do, and Steven promised me that the stream would be over.
Okay,
at 5.
I will. This will be it, and then we'll end it.
It's
and you can say your
5:15.
thing. Here we go.
All
if
right.
you watch
Until
Adam's,
next time,
wait,
everyone.
let me finish. If you
What?
watch Adam's Family Values, the boyfriend of Wednesday Addams, his last name is Glicker, by the way. So there you go.
In the like the character.
Yes,
in
the
thing?
character's name. It's like
Okay,
David
fair
Glicker.
enough.
And then the counselor goes, and little Mr. Glicker here. And my brother and I were like, oh!
Oh wow. The one who like dies if he uses fabric softener or
Yes,
whatever.
yes. And then he ends up like dating Wednesday Addams. So that's pretty good.
Fair enough.
Pretty good.
All right then, everybody. So with that piece of information, until next time, if you want to battle the zoo, you have to roll for combat.